Welcome to the September 19th, 2023 regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. For detailed information on meeting procedures, please review the full printed meeting agenda provided. Ms. Leo, will you please call the roll?
I will, thank you. Chair Lee.
Here.
Vice Chair Abrams.
Here.
Secretary White.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here.
Commissioner Dish.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
And Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
All members are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Commissioner White, seconded by Councilmember Dish. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the September 6th? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Councilmember Dish. Is there any discussion of the minutes? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We're going to move on to reports from City Administration. Next up are reports of the Planning Commission and written communication. Councilmember Dish, do you have any report?
Yes. Last night at the council meeting, the rezoning of the two residential buildings on Celine Road was approved from residential to office. And I don't remember anything that should interest you, but I'm forgetting something.
Thank you. Ms. Leo, do you have anything to report?
I do have a few informational things from the planning manager that I'm calling up right now. From the planning manager, Brett Leonard. The website for the comprehensive plan work is up and running. It has a short code of plan.a2gov.org/plan24. The steering committee applications are also live and are being collected for anyone who'd like to apply. There was a press release on Monday announcing this, and the applications will be open until October 6th. Everyone is invited to apply. There is also a listserv or an update list that you can join. You can sign up for that at plan.a2gov.org/compplan updates, COMPPLAN UPDATES. Planning staff will be at the Green Fair this Friday from 5 to 8. The Green Fair is, I believe, on Main Street downtown. And there'll be a booth there. You can stop by and learn about the comp plan or make some comments. And finally, our consultant team will be joining the Planning Commission's working session on October 11th. Those are it for planning manager tidbits.
Thank you. Do other commissioner officers or committee liaison have anything to report? Commissioner Sauvé.
So I'll do an informal report on House Party, since I think all of you are aware of it. But last week, we had 11 events talking about housing, 221 unique participants, 47 individuals from our community contributed to the communications, and the University of Michigan students collected a lot of information on Wednesday and Saturday specifically to provide to Interface. So we're looking forward to them consolidating and including that in the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Written communications are included in today's packet, so we will move on to item number 6, public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about an issue that is not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We'll first call on individuals to present to the commission and then remote participants. So to speak during this public hearing remotely, please press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. Do we have any callers?
We do have one caller, and their hand is raised. Caller with the phone number ending 429. You are now open to talk and can speak to the Planning Commission for 3 minutes. Caller ending 429, you'll have to unmute yourself by pressing *9, and then you're free to speak to the Planning Commission. The caller has lowered their hand.
I think it's *6 that they need to push on. *9.
Okay, one more time, but they have lowered their hand. But, okay, hands back. Caller ending 429, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. Press all the stars.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. *6. Got it. Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Clark McCaw. I live at 3355 Yellowstone in Ann Arbor. Thank you, Commissioners, for your public service work on the Commission. I am in favor of rezoning, or of requiring future developments in Ann Arbor to be all electric. I know it's expensive to live in Ann Arbor. That's part of the reason is because there is tremendous demand to live here. The demand is due in part to Ann Arbor being a vibrant, forward-thinking, culture-rich environment. And transitioning to all-electric housing is all part of this big picture. We, the people of Ann Arbor, are attempting to lead the way, as we often do, and going all-electric is part of, or a piece of, leading the way. It's part of our character. Thank you.
Thank you. And procedurally speaking, I'm just going to back up real quick, simply because we normally do people who are present and then calls, so I do apologize for that. So so let me just back up and ask, is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time on a matter that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one, we will go back to addressing the commission remotely. Is there any? Oh, sorry. I can't. Would you like to speak? Okay. Is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely? Ms. Leo.
We do have one additional caller. Alex Lowe, you can unmute yourself and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes. Unmute by pressing *9. *6, press *6.
Fortunately, I'm on Zoom, so just have to press the unmute button. Thank you, folks. I really do like the idea of getting more electric and less gas in the city, but I think that using that as a way to hamper intermediate development is probably more harmful than it is helpful, especially when we have to consider things like how far people are going to be commuting, etc. Rather, I would love to see the city do something like starting to phase out gas stoves in all residences. There's really clear and really sound science showing how bad it is for indoor air quality, etc. So this would help us to both improve our health and be environmentally friendly. Also, I really like seeing the removal of the FARs in D1 and D2 on the table. I just wish that we'd extend that to all zones. Would be far better, in my opinion, if we just had no FAR limits throughout the city and started managing things by number of floors and height. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other callers, Ms. Stilio?
We do not.
Okay, with that, we will close public hearing. This is number 7, agenda number 7, public hearings for the next business meeting. Staff. Sorry, we're moving quick.
We'll get it together by tomorrow. We do have 2 public hearings to announce that will be on the next Planning Commission meeting, which is Tuesday, October 23rd at 7 p.m. The first is for 1655 Plymouth Road, a planned unit development, PUD, zoned parcel, site plan for City Planning Commission approval. It is a proposal to demolish the existing structure, formerly the Wendy's restaurant, and construct an approximately 2,500 square foot Taco Bell restaurant with single drive-through lane. Site access to remain off of Plymouth Road and Osage Drive with 35 parking spaces located in the front of the restaurant. This is a 0.98 acre site. The second public hearing on Tuesday, October 23rd, meeting starting at 7 p.m. is, what did I say? Naturally. The second meeting for Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023, starting at 7 p.m., is 900 Briarwood, a site plan and rezoning for city council approval. The developer is proposing to raise the existing Sears store, which is 166,277 square feet, and construct a grocer at 57,694 square feet, and a sporting goods store, 100,000 square feet, 2 levels, and an adjacent playing field. In addition to the retail, the proposal includes 354 units of multifamily residential in a 4-story building, or buildings, planned to be constructed adjacent to the grocery store. A parking garage will be constructed surrounding the residential units. Parking spaces will be redesigned on the site with landscaping and stormwater infiltration islands added. A new internal connector roadway is proposed to be constructed, creating a new intersection with Briarwood Circle east of Mall Drive. Rezoning from P parking to C2B. The site is 18.2 acres. It is the total site planned area, of which 8.29 acres is proposed to be rezoned.
Thank you. With that, we are moving on to Section 9A of the agenda, regular business. This is a UDC premiums amendment. I will introduce a petition. Amendment to the Unified Development Code, Chapter 55 of Ann Arbor City Code, premiums. Amendments to Chapter 55 UDC to eliminate floor area premiums provided in Section 5.18.6 premiums and to change the maximum FAR of the downtown D1 core and D2 downtown interface in Sections 5.17.4 mixed-use zoning districts, Table 5.17-4, from up to 900% and 400% respectively to none. The staff recommendations is approval. We'll move on to consultant presentation, and I believe prior to that we have recusals from
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Selby.
Chair Lee, I'd like to recuse myself at this time based on involvement of an active petition in the D1 district. So thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I will also move to recuse myself from this discussion as my employer owns property in the D1 zone.
All right, so we are now welcoming our colleague from Carlisle Wortman for a brief presentation.
Thank you. Good evening.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you and good evening. It's good to be in front of you tonight. As noted, I'm Ben Carlisle with Carlisle Wortman Associates. I have a very brief presentation. I know you have a long agenda, so I'll make sure there's adequate time to address everything else on the agenda. But tonight I'm here to talk about the proposed text amendments to amend the premium as well as the downtown zoning regulations. However, let's use the next slide. I think it's important to start this discussion with going back a little bit, talking about the process and how we got to this space. The city and the Planning Commission has been working with us on this for the past 9 months, since January. And I think the timing of this is really appropriate based on the great work that your own commissioner is doing, as well as the recent articles you've seen, obviously, in the Ann Arbor News addressing some of the housing issues we have here in Ann Arbor. How we started way back when in January was we started with a review and analysis of the existing premiums. And of a particular importance to us of that process was to ensure that the current...
Oh, it helps to turn on the microphone, doesn't it?
hope you heard my introduction. Okay, thank you. So a particular importance was to ensure and discuss whether or not the existing premiums were, one, consistent with the current city goals and policies, and two, to ensure or discuss how they were being utilized or how they were not being utilized. Based on the existing review of the premiums with both the Planning Commission and the city staff, we felt that they were not advancing city goals and potentially stifling development in the downtown that the city was trying to achieve. So from there, we work with the city and various stakeholders to, one, establish potential assumptions for these amendments to ensure that we were all on the same page, working off the same sheet music with regards to what we assumed was happening in the downtown with regards to development. Draft policy options for the Planning Commission and others to consider. Vet those policy options with various stakeholders and community members. Present a UDC amendments for consideration, and that's where we're at tonight, is considering actual text amendment to the proposed UDC with regards to zoning. It's also worth noting that this was not done in a vacuum just between the Planning Commission and the city staff and us. We, over the past 8 months, have gone out and discussed these options with the various stakeholders at multiple points throughout the process. And the stakeholders, I know I'm going to leave out a few, include the affordable housing community, the downtown development authority, the sustainability community, and the building and development community. So they were all part of that discussion and getting us to the point where we're at today. If you can move forward. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these assumptions because we have vetted these and gone over these in detail over the past 9 months. But it's important to note that we use these as the foundation under which we would approach the amendments to the zoning district regulations. But in summary, basically, the assumptions that we all came up as a group was there should be an equilibrium or balance of land uses in the downtown between residential, commercial, and other in-office uses. Developing in downtown is more difficult and more expensive than anywhere else in the city. Since the last amendments to the premium in 2019, there has been an affordable housing millage which does support additional housing, affordable housing efforts in the city, but I think we recognize that that alone is not enough to meet the affordable housing demands. A significant number of properties are ineligible for premiums in the downtown based on their location either in historic district considerations and or location in the floodplain. The current residential market in the downtown currently being built is either high-end, low-scale residential or student rental, and it does not provide the necessary attainable high density that we are seeking. And attainable housing in the downtown is important to address both current as future and our residents' needs. And lastly, current premiums are not being utilized to their potential due to a variety of reasons. Alexis, moving on. Thanks. So based off those assumptions and going and working with the Planning Commission and the various stakeholders, there were 3 common goals that came out of what we were trying to achieve through this process and through the premium discussion. First was increase the affordability of in the downtown with regards to housing. And this is accomplished in 2 ways, both through streamlining the development process, but also increasing the housing supply in the downtown. The second goal was to increase sustainability. Again, this goes more to the market side about increasing the amount of supply in the downtown because this is where the infrastructure, the jobs, transportation, and a mix of land use already currently exist to support additional housing. And lastly, increase the equity in the downtown, both for supply of housing and commercial, but also enlarge the development pool of applicants that can actually develop and build in the downtown. So those are the 3 goals that we started, that were formed out of this whole discussion. If you can move to the next one. So based on those assumptions that led to these goals, led to discussion with the Planning Commission, this is where we're at tonight. It's funny because we had spent 8 months to come up with pretty simple text amendments. It's actually removing language, not adding, not amending, it's removing language. So essentially, it's based on these goals. The proposed amendment is to eliminate FAR regulations from the D1 and D2 and regulate massing through setbacks and height. And the second, by eliminating FAR in the D1 and D2, the need for premiums are eliminated, and those are recommended for removal as well. So, what's the impact of these amendments? First off, in our research of comparable communities, we've found that most do not have premiums. And most regulate massing through either FAR or height, but they don't do it with both. We found that eliminating the FAR and rather regulating through height and setbacks and other measures makes development in this town easier, streamlines the process, and makes it easier for city administration as in part of the review. Essentially, we found that utilizing both FAR and height was complex and not necessarily would affect the development massing in the downtown. Because what we found was FAR was not the limiting factor on development in the downtown. It was height was the limiting and restricting factor. So by limiting FAR, you're really not affecting what can be built in the downtown. We do note that we are not recommending any changes to the height exceptions for sustainable and affordable housing developments. That provision of the ordinance still exists. We are also not creating any new precedents in the city by doing this, as you've already eliminated FAR considerations in the TC1, and again, you regulate that through height and setbacks as well. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the city now is undergoing a comprehensive planning process where the issue of height in the downtown probably should and could be discussed in that process in context of the larger city goals of what's trying to be achieved. So again, just to reiterate, the regulations that are going to remain that we're recommending is, from a massing standpoint, still going to regulate massing through the character zones. The front setbacks will remain. There's no proposed change to that. And the height restrictions will still remain. So for that reason, we do think that the familiar building forms you see today will remain, since the building massing and setbacks are not proposed to change. Simply we're eliminating the FAR as part of the equation. And lastly, as I noted, the height bonus will also remain as is moving forward as well. Last slide, I believe. So it's also important to when you consider zoning amendments, it's important to consider what the implications are, what the consequences are, and what some unintentional consequences may be. I've addressed most of these in the presentation, but I just want to reiterate again, most comparable communities do not regulate via FAR and height. They pick one to regulate massing, and most do not have any sort of premium measure in their ordinance. We don't think there's going to be an increase in buildable area, since the height, again, is mostly the limiting factor that we studied for the recent developments in the downtown. However, we do know it is probably likely that it's going to be easier to reach the maximum height because of those FAR restrictions are removed. We are likely to see similar building forms because, again, we are not changing height, massing, or building front setbacks. We anticipate a similar amount of construction that we've seen in the downtown to what we saw before the last round of premium amendments. Again, that's very contingent on market conditions, and we just can't predict what that's going to be, but at least we're limiting restrictions to the zoning ordinance. We do think that there's going to be a number of dwelling units proposed, an increase from what we've seen in the last 2 years. And we think most importantly, perhaps, is that the diversity of the downtown development opens up too, because we're lowering that bar of FAR requirements. So in summary, we are recommending, based on the direction from the Planning Commission and other stakeholders, to eliminate the FAR in the D1 and D2 and removed the premium section from the UDO as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leo, do you have a staff presentation?
Only very briefly, and it's just to point out some of the resources that are available. And as Brett did go over, Ben, this is clearly not my night. I'm just going to get that, out there. As Ben mentioned, we started and kicked off in February with a Planning Commission meeting where we went over what our initial review and analysis was. And then we worked through meetings in April, May, stakeholder meetings in May and June. We talked about concepts and options about what to do in July, and again in August. And here we are before you. The planning staff do recommend approval of the proposed amendments. We have prepared the ordinance language for you to consider. And as I've mentioned, we have done some analysis, looked at past projects that have been recently approved, say in the past 10 years, both in the D1 and the D2, thinking about that what if scenario, and what if we did this a few years ago, and what we found is that most projects either got to the maximum FAR, or if they didn't, it's because they ran into the height limit. And so with these changes, the physical skyline will probably not and change. Now, it will get taller because as new development comes online, new buildings, but these new buildings proposed are probably going to be of the same size and scale, and all depending on the size of the site compared to what they have been. The market is asking for residential. This is probably what we're still going to be seeing, even though we are not having a residential premium. These new developments will continue to support our affordable housing millage, and also just our downtown tax increment financing districts, and then those monies can be then used for other supportive things as they are intended. Ben and myself are happy to answer any questions, but I'll stop there and let the discussion begin.
Thank you. So now we'll move to the public hearing on this item. An opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed Chapter 55 City Code amendments regarding downtown premiums. Excuse me. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, and then remote participants to speak during the public hearing remotely. Press star 9 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers who have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of their phone number, or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute television or background sounds so we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? You can approach the podium. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Carson Van Fossen, and I live at 1 Marshall Court in Ann Arbor. And I'm just here to speak in support of the change to the FAR requirements, or the removal of the FAR requirements, because it is one thing that I do believe, even just like trying to read it myself, it just seemed very complicated. And if we're trying to encourage development downtown Ann Arbor, which I believe that we should, then that is removing those requirements is one way to reduce red tape and allow more housing units to be built for more people. Just giving an example of a city that's not quite as equivalent to ours, but a city that's also thought about redoing its about changing its zoning. In Minneapolis, they recently completed it's been several years since they completed a change to their zoning process that increased FAR limits. And that city in the past 5 or so years has had like the lowest rate of rent inflation in the country. So in Ann Arbor, where rent is so high as it is, I do believe that this is one way of helping to reduce that, or helping to reduce the future burden on people. So thank you for allowing me my time to speak, and that's all.
Thanks. Is there anybody else present who would like to address the commission?
You're also removing premiums while still allowing 30% more height with either. I support our rule because it's getting more density. But my concern is about the affordable housing sustainability. Yes, you can build your way out of a housing shortage. By increasing supply, you reduce pressure on prices. Am I on now? Yes. To recap, I support this, but yeah, you can build your way out of a housing crisis, or at least reduce pressure on prices. So rewarding that with greater height makes total sense. But you can't build your way out of a climate crisis unless it's net zero energy. Any new building will add carbon to the atmosphere, and the bigger the building, the more carbon. Yes, density aids sustainability, but marginally compared to the impact of burning gas. I've crunched the numbers. That's why 820 assumes that all new construction starting in 2022 is net zero energy, including no gas. Right now, the sustainability component consists of height exception consists of solar panels covering 60% of the roof space, and if the building is not fully electric at the time of construction, it has the capacity to achieve full electrification at a future date. That's not good enough. To align with 820 and to avoid adding emissions, we should only allow extra height if there is full electrification at the time of construction and net zero energy. And include both and developers should include both the affordable housing and sustainability components for that 30% height bonus, not just one or the other. We can't put up buildings that lock in decades of carbon emissions and certainly not be incentivizing them to build even higher. Maybe that would have made sense 20 or 30 years ago, but not now. Our carbon budgets are dwindling for any future that we care to live in. To conclude, yeah, approve these, the fire removal in D1 and D2, but to get the 30% additional height, require both affordable housing and sustainability components, not one or the other, and change the definition of sustainability to include net zero energy buildings and no gas at the time of construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody who would like to address the commission remotely?
Yes, we have one participant, Alex Lowe. Alex Lowe, you may now unmute and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Hi, it's me again. I want to say again that I support this. I think we should be getting rid of all FAR restrictions throughout the city. I think that we should be massively liberalizing our height restrictions in general. And I think that if we really want to tackle the environmental damage caused by buildings within our city that is mostly constructed already, we should be focusing on how we can make those existing places more environmentally friendly. For example, instead of making it harder to build new buildings, which will just lead to more buildings that are less efficient and and longer commutes for people that are further out, which seems like a lose-lose-lose situation to me on an environmental standpoint. Let's rather focus on if you offer people parking, you're going to have to start paying annually for the environmental costs of that parking. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other participants or callers. For one last chance, anyone on Zoom who would like to address the Planning Commission at this public hearing, press star 9 to raise your hand, or raise your hand. Again, there are no hands raised.
All right, then I will close the public hearing and I'll read the proposed motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission recommends that the mayor and city council approve the amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code to eliminate the floor area premiums provided in Section 5.18.6 premiums and to change the maximum FAR, floor area ratio, as a percentage of lot area of the D1 downtown core and D2 downtown interface in Section 5.17.4 mixed-use zoning districts, Table 5.17-4, from up to 900% and 400% respectively to none. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Weisch. We are in discussion. Is there anybody who would like to begin our discussion? Commissioner Mills.
I think I said this the last time or the second to last time we talked about this. I want to compliment this process and that we really started with making sure we shared the same assumptions. And I think that the tweaks to the assumptions actually were really useful and helpful. I appreciated then that we had goals that we talked about both on commission and in the stakeholder groups to get kind of what are the priorities associated with this. And I appreciate too that the solution arrived at is the simple solution, a subtraction rather than an addition. And I think that's really elegant. And I think that this will make for clearer, better code that I think will achieve our goals. And I think this is also just a good reminder to all of us that if something's not working, just because you draft it doesn't mean it's cast in stone forever, that the zoning ordinance is a living document, and that we should be evaluating it to make sure that we're getting what it is that we want. And I think it's great that we were able to do that here. So I'm looking forward to supporting this.
Commissioner Weatherby.
I'd just like to echo that. I feel a little bit like I fell asleep and woke up 4 years later, and we're still talking about the same. Because when I was last on Planning Commission, we were just about to approve this, and now here we are approving a different version of it, and I actually think it's great. Because as Commissioner Mills points out, it's been a big 4 years. Things have changed. And our intention is pretty much the same. We want more affordability, we want more sustainability, but it's just, we're thinking of it in a slightly different way, and it's great that we're making these changes to make that process better. So I think it's a really good thing, and something that we should think for other processes that we do, because looking at 50-year-old documents to plan the future is probably not ideal.
Commissioner Dish.
So, yes, I also want to say that the process has been terrific, and I think the output is great. But I have a couple of questions, and part of that is just because one of my roles is to be able to make sure that I can explain this to the public, and so I have to make sure that I understand it really, really well. So one of my questions is going to be just nailing how much we have actually changed with this subtraction. But another question, which is probably easier, is in your report at the end, in the summary part, you note that you are seeing multifamily residential development throughout Southeast Michigan, and that there's lots of financing for that. And I wondered if you are talking about student housing or all kinds of multi-family rental housing?
So we work throughout Southeast Michigan. Ann Arbor, take this in a good spirit, is a kind of an anomaly compared to a lot of places in Southeast Michigan. So we're seeing a significant amount of housing, multifamily housing throughout the area that we work in. It's not student housing. It's mostly market rate housing. We see very little student housing outside of the Ann Arbor City area. Some of the surrounding townships we work in, we see a little bit of student housing, but outside of that area, we don't see any student housing. It's market rate multifamily housing in most of these communities.
Okay.
And everything from duplexes all the way to higher rise or mid-rise apartment types developments.
Okay. Okay, that's great. That's good to hear. So we are anomalous in that. Okay. So I am trying to understand exactly what simplifies the premiums over the current model. And I think that clearly one aspect of it is by removing the FAR, by ceasing to link or ceasing to offer premiums that are calculated in terms of FAR, but linking directly to height. That is a simplification. Okay. You note that to qualify, that some of the things that are cumbersome about the current process is that to qualify for premiums currently, a developer must provide affordable housing and/or achieve LEED certification. So am I incorrect that this will still be the case, except that a developer will be able to provide 100% payment in lieu under the new rules that we are adopting?
So,
Yeah.
so the recommendation is to eliminate all premiums.
Right.
So the affordable housing in the unit or affordable housing in lieu is removed, other than if you go for the height, which we didn't spend much time studying in depth through this process.
Okay, so.
Where we started was look at the premiums, tell us if they're working, if they're not working, why not? And through this process, it's been an evolution. If you would have told me 9 months ago we would have ended up here today, I probably wouldn't have thought that to be true. But one of the fundamental things with zoning is make what you want easy to do. Mm-hmm. And from everything we've heard and everything we discussed with the community and the Planning Commission, easier process, simplifying the process, opening up the field to other development community is a good thing. And the easiest way to do that is to eliminate unnecessary or burdensome regulations.
Okay, so let me try
And so
a different.
by removing, so not adding, not amending, not changing,
Right.
but by removing, if nothing else, you're removing a burdensome, cumbersome regulation that's stifling the goals of what this community is trying to achieve.
Okay, so in the memo that you offered us a couple months ago, which was a great memo.
I have to go back a couple months ago here.
As they often been. No, I will remind you. You stated, and you restated in this memo as well, that we were not seeing buildings maxing out their FAR. We were seeing them maxing out height. So height is limiting density.
Correct.
So, yes, these reforms eliminate premiums, but they also, I don't know if this was always the case, but they also say that the 30% additional height that's available elsewhere in the city for an affordability or a sustainability component is available in the downtown.
Correct.
Now, if projects were maxing out height under the current regime, that suggests that more height is desired.
Correct.
Than what our height limits, right? And so we may have eliminated the old scheme of premiums that was linked to FAR, but because we haven't increased height at all, we are making it likely that people will still that there will still be a desire to have a height increase, which does call premiums into play. They are citywide premiums, no longer downtown-specific premiums,
Correct.
no longer tied to FAR.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, first a question. If you were just making sure to establish an understanding, I will stop. But if you were looking for some clarification, I would say that most projects downtown have used the premiums. So first up, but the base FAR is fairly low, about half what most projects are. And then so most projects have used premiums. So right there, we are making it easier. There's no magic formula to unlock more development. We are just raising the bar, saying that 400% floor area ratio in the D1 core or 200% in the D2, that's not we are raising the bar. And we are raising it to kind of what the developments are that used premiums. So we are right off saying bigger is better. We want density, and we're going to make it much easier for you to do that, regardless of your use. And we've removed the barriers. You don't have to achieve 2 points in an old version of LEED. And you don't have to provide affordable housing, affordable residential in your building. You don't have to get LEED certification. So we've made it just plain easier, much more intuitive, Someone can call up and say, I've got this address, and I can say, well, whatever building you can fit under maybe 180 feet or maybe 150 feet. So that's what we are saying, it's making it easier. We're probably going to get the same buildings in the end. The skyline will look very similar. It's much easier to explain. Tell me your address, I'll tell you your zoning district, and this is your box that you can build in. So we've removed a lot of that complication. We will not be getting any affordable housing contributions in lieu because there's no requirement anymore.
No, right.
Right.
Unless they want.
Unless they would like even to exceed the height. But we've made the first step much easier. There's still a second step if they really want to go big. But, does this at all?
Yes, and can I ask you one more thing?
Yes.
Because this I was sort of afraid to say because I thought I was way off. But based on your response, I do think I understand it well, which is that in order to even reach the max height that was allowable, they were needing premiums because FAR was capped, or our base FAR was so small that you just couldn't go up to 180 feet unless you took the FAR premium, and then you didn't actually even max out on all the FAR you could have because the height capped you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is unclear if they didn't max out just because that was the design and they were very happy with that, or if they would have liked to go more. But to meet our goals of making it much easier, but knowing you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. So the height limit remains, the massing, the building articulation, the modules, setbacks and so forth, they remain.
Yeah.
But just then the additional layer of what's the maximum floor area.
Right.
That's been removed.
So to achieve the maximum height, that has always been the maximum height, they no longer have to access premiums.
For the height on the books.
For the height that's on the books, right.
Correct.
And should they want to exceed that height, they can through premiums, but the premiums are, the citywides are premiums.
They're
They're labeled as
exceptions to height
as
limits.
exceptions.
We are eliminating premiums.
Exceptions to
Yes.
height limits.
I suppose one could possibly.
It's nuance, but
I was just going to say
Depends on what
one.
the definition of is.
Yes.
Yeah.
One could call it a premium, but it's not a premium like with
Okay.
a capital P.
All right.
It is a different, it's a premium, it's a bonus,
but
it's
you
an
got
exception.
to give up something that's in
Yes.
provide affordable housing
Exactly.
or
You
sustainability
have to
to
give
get that additional height.
That
bonus,
exception
yes.
to the height limit. Okay,
So we're
cool.
we're not recommending that be removed. That stays on the books.
Right. Okay, I will correct my semantics, and I do think that I understand in principle fully what we've done, and I agree with something that Commissioner Mills said last time, which was we've really made this a lot easier to get even the height that we were already allowing. So that's good. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's really helpful.
Any other comments for discussion? I just had a question for staff. I noticed in the staff report urging a quick consideration of section 5.18.4 exceptions to height limits. And I noticed that in that recommendation, it lists all of the kind of built elements that we might consider. And I wondered, but it doesn't list a consideration of the sustainable and affordable housing development part of that ordinance. And I wondered if you could maybe just share with us a little bit about the rationale behind that.
The rationale would be because it has not come up yet. I heard it tonight. I think it's a great idea. Our plan as staff was to work with the Ordinance Revisions Committee at their next available meeting, which they have a meeting in September that has been booked, and they will be meeting again in November. And so we have a discussion in November about draft language, and it could come up there, should it be expanded. Because it's more of an idea, it's not a proposed amendment yet, it's all on the table.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Weich?
And just to clarify, what we are potentially bringing to ORC is removing the mechanical equipment from the height consideration so that a developer doesn't get penalized if they have to have an HVAC that's at the top of the building and they're already at the maximum height and such they'd have to take out a floor of housing, like a story of housing in order to get back within the requirement. So we're looking to not, is that what we're looking at? I'll ask the question that way, sorry.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All right, I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
All right. Sorry, skipping Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Dish,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
and Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
There are 5 affirmative votes. The motion carries.
Thank you.
No, that's 7. There's 7.
7, but the motion still
It
carries.
does.
We're going to take a brief pause to welcome Commissioner Lee and Commissioner Sauvé back to the chamber.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thanks. Yep.
I saw a flash. Oh, that's Matt. I propose maybe a 1 or 2 minute break.
All right, we're going. Oh, here they come.
All right, I am back. So we will move on to. Oh, thank you. Cool. Yes. All right. We're moving on to section 9B, regular business. This is 3520 Green Court, a plan unit development text amendment for city council approval. The proposed amended supplemental regulations will expand the permitted principal uses of the PUD. That's the plan unit development. The permitted principal uses would add medical and dental offices, expand the definition of hotel, and would permit development of multifamily residential housing, which is currently excluded. This PUD district includes 35.26 acres. Staff recommendation is approval. And so we will move on to petitioner presentation.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. My name is David Calden. I'm with Varnum LLP, and we're counsel for the applicant, Alterum Institute. With me today is Ms. Tracy Lawyer, who is Alterum's general counsel, and joining us via Zoom are Ms. Denise Stern, the CFO, and Mr. Anson Burlescans, the paralegal in Tracy's office. So we're here tonight to talk about revisions to the ERM PUD. If you're interested, that acronym ERM comes from the former name of Alterum, which was the Environmental Research Institute of Michigan, and it was the owner of the PUD when it was established in 1998. How we got here tonight is that well, first, I want to thank Matt and your staff who have been incredibly helpful throughout the process and really available and really responsive. So I want to thank them. But we started with Matt last year We appeared before the Planning Commission in October of last year. We presented the project that we're talking about tonight. Subsequent to that meeting, there was a citizen participation meeting that was on May 2. There were 651 residents that received a notice of that hearing, and there were really only 3 attendees, one of which was a representative of the parcels. So there hasn't been a ton of neighbor involvement. There were a couple of comments that were received. Those comments were generally in the nature of questions about the proposed use of the vacant property in the PUD. And then following that meeting, we finalized the application. We submitted that to staff for review in June, and staff did a review, suggested a few minor changes, and subsequently this meeting was noticed. And so with that, let's jump into quickly a very brief overview of the project. The project is in the red box that's shown here. It's northeasterly of downtown Ann Arbor and northeasterly of the University of Michigan's North Campus. Next slide, please. Thank you. It's zooming in further. It's located between Green Road and US 23, just south of Plymouth Road. It's generally surrounded by commercial and multifamily properties on the south, commercial on the north. Next slide. Zooming in all the way, we see there's 5 parcels in the PUD. It comprises a total of 35.26 acres, and each of those parcels is outlined here. Next slide. And then here's a good view of sort of the current conditions at the site. 4 of the parcels are presently used for an extended stay hotel and commercial office purposes. Alterum owns one of those commercial office properties. It's kind of the bottom left property. And it also owns the remaining vacant lot, which is a 7.16 acre property in the top left there of the picture. We are not presenting a site plan for that vacant parcel tonight. Instead, we're just proposing some text revisions to the supplemental regulations. Those have been reviewed by staff, and I'll quickly explain those changes now. Next slide, please, Matt. First, the changes would allow medical and dental office uses in addition to general office uses, hotels in addition to extended stay hotels, and multifamily residential uses. We believe that these uses are consistent with the character of the area, compatible with the other uses surrounding the PUD, including the multifamily that I mentioned to the south earlier. And we think that incorporating medical and dental professional office uses along with general office uses is much more consistent with your current UDC, which of course does allow those sorts of professional offices in general office, in the general office district. Next slide. In connection with these expanded uses, which would allow multifamily housing, we've heard, of course, that the provision of affordable housing is important to the city. We studied the UDC, and we noted that, as shown here, the UDC requires that if the FAR is between 75 and 100%, then 10% of the total dwelling units must be affordable housing dwelling units. And if the FAR is more than 100%, then 15% of the dwelling units must be affordable. In our proposed supplemental regulations, we would increase those figures from 10 and 15% respectively to 15 and 20% respectively, which provides a public benefit. And although not noted here, the supplemental regulations would allow that requirement to be satisfied by payment of affordable housing contribution consistent with the formula that is established by the City Council by resolution annually, or by a combination of affordable housing units and a contribution. So to clarify, we're proposing to provide 5% more affordable housing than is required by ordinance. Next slide. And finally, the proposed text changes would incorporate the city's more current development standards relative to things like landscaping, lighting, and parking, and also increase the permitted floor area ratio subject to the affordable housing requirement that I just mentioned. An example of those more current standards is that the city's zoning ordinance now requires down-directed or so-called dark skies type lighting to help prevent light pollution, and those sorts of provisions are incorporated by reference to the UDC. Many of these changes were suggested by staff. Helpfully, we agree that these sorts of, primarily dimensional and sort of, construction guidelines will help to ensure that the property is consistent with your current zoning ordinance and that the property is not underutilized. Next slide. So to conclude, there have obviously been a lot of changes, societal and demographic, since this PUD was initially established in 1998. It's resulted for the need of different types of development, changes in the way that development is done in the city. There's obviously now much more emphasis on creating a walkable and bikeable community than was the case in 1998. And of course, the proper utilization of infill property to prevent sprawl is much more highlighted now than it was previously. We believe that these proposed amendments will bring the PUD language up to the state of the art, make the property more useful to meet the current needs of the city, and to ensure good and efficient development in the PUD. We were also pleased to see that the staff supports these changes. And so for all of these reasons, we ask for your recommendation to the City Council in favor of these changes tonight. And Tracy and I will be here to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will go on to staff presentation. Mr. Kowalski.
Good evening. Okay, so petitioner did a good job of summarizing up really the basis of why they're here tonight. So as I indicated, it really started with the request to add a multifamily use to these, to the district. And again, I want to make sure that it's clear that we are talking about the PUD, the entire district that you see on the screen here. So again, I mean, we tend to maybe focus a little bit more on the vacant parcel because that's obviously most likely the next one that would probably be developed. However, these regulations do apply to all of the properties within the PUD district. So again, as multifamily is specifically excluded from there. It was one of our earliest PUDs. It has a really interesting mix of uses that if many of which we kept because I think one of the benefits of this PUD is really a unique, diverse mix of uses that we don't allow anywhere else. I mean, there's light industrial that's allowed here. If you read that, it exists, you know, craft manufacturing. It says like glass making. There's really, it's like I said, I've never quite seen one. And those uses, like I said, are kind of, they're quasi-manufacturing and things. So we wouldn't allow those with any other, typically with residential type uses. And I don't know why exactly that was put in there from the beginning. Yes? Oh, sorry.
Mike. Your mic?
Oh, I gotta move it a little closer. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Didn't have my glasses, so I saw you reading. So again, the diverse bit of uses. So that goes to one of the public benefits. We also felt as staff that it was a reason why we preserved those uses, although they're not really being utilized now. That's truly something that unique that we don't have in other uses with residential and office. Again, things that were excluded, like medical dental offices. I don't see any reason why we would exclude those going forward. It had other unique extended stay hotel. Again, to us, a hotel is a hotel. That doesn't really matter. And then there was numerous other items that were in the previous supplemental regs that, again, we don't have in supplemental regs currently. Nowadays, these were many of the requirements that were typically now in code, things regarding landscape buffering, access. There's other items like that. And also there are some design requirements, things that were a little bit more vague that would be basically impossible for staff to enforce, saying things like the new buildings plan there have to meet the common theme of the district. I don't know what that is. So we removed a lot of non-substantive, what we would call, and hopefully Planning Commission agrees, items through here, which again are unenforceable at the end of the day. We've also tried to bring it up, as was mentioned, to some of our current standards, you know, removing, there's no parking minimum, there is a parking maximum. There, again, updating some of the uses within there. The FAR limit, again, was lifted. That was also kind of a comment from Planning Commission initially when we presented this back as a pre-PUD concept meeting, was a comment regarding the FAR as well as the affordable housing. That was something that, as you know, now affordable housing is a requirement in the PUD. However, the petitioners have offered to go above and beyond that to increase the PUD and increase the affordable housing within the PUD. And again, that would affect any parcel that's being developed within the district now. And that would be above the base FAR of 75%. So again, currently like existing PUDs. And the reason why the 75% was chosen, that was the original, we flipped all the way back through the original zoning. It was an ORL type of zoning back then, so office, research, light industrial, basically, and that was the original FAR limit. What's in the district now is 40%, which, I mean, I think most of us probably feel is pretty low for parcels within the city. So we've obviously eliminated that. The height limit has been increased a little bit from 4 stories to 5 stories, and 65 feet. So previously 4 stories and 50 feet, now to 5 and 65. I mentioned the issue with the hotel, or all hotels are now permitted. We did add, again, working with the petitioner, is something that staff kind of offered, the petitioner agreed, is to kind of add in as an accessory retail type of use. Truly is an accessory use. It's written in the supplemental regulations. I think we have a 10% and up to a 12,000 square foot limit as an accessory use to any building. And I believe that covers really the substantial changes. One other thing, I know that was mentioned by a public commenter earlier in one of the communications through email, was the issue regarding curb cuts. The PUD does have a restriction now that says 2 access points to Green Road, and that's what's there now. So we didn't change that, and that again is the district. It's not just these parcels, so basically they could maybe move a curb cut, but they're not allowed another curb cut directly to Green Road. And other things were setbacks. We did bring the setbacks, the front setbacks in particular, into basically to align with some of our current standards. We've designed this much like the office district. Some of the standards that I looked at regarding the setbacks were setbacks that are similar in the office districts as well. So the 15-foot front setback, as well as the height. The height is also consistent with the office district. And I believe that summarizes up the changes. And of course, I will be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. We're moving on to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the proposed 3520 Green Road PUD text amendment. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 or possibly *6 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers who've raised their hand using the last 3 digits of their phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background noises so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name, address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Mr. Garber.
Of course. Thank you, Chair Lee. Yeah, Alterum has an interesting history. As Mr. Calden mentioned, it came out of ERM, the Environmental Research Institute of Michigan, which was deceptively named. This was Ann Arbor's biggest military contractor during the 70s and 80s and was a target of Vietnam-era protesters when it was called the Willow Run Labs in the 60s. In the late 90s, ERM created a for-profit arm that later became part of General Dynamics. They pretty much moved away, while the nonprofit ERM bought another local military contractor, Vector Research, and renamed itself Alterum. It now does healthcare research, mostly for the government, no classified military research anymore, as far as I know. So there's a for sale sign in front of the company's vacant 7.2-acre parcel on Green Road. Alterum obviously wants more flexibility for the parcel and maybe for other parts of its site, which if you were looking at the aerial renderings, rather resembles a sea of parking with 3 buildings on it, except for the 77.2 vacant acres. And yes, it would be nice to have multifamily housing on those 7.2 acres, and this will allow for that, but there's no guarantee that that's what the eventual buyer is going to build. Alterum, to my view, is offering very little new public benefit, a slight increase in affordable housing beyond what's already in the PUD. That's about it. The parking maximums are the same as in the UDC. These could be lowered, especially if Alterum is willing to open up the new development to some of the vast amount of parking already on the site. But most importantly, there was nothing here about electrification or energy efficiency. So as I already have mentioned ad nauseum, the 820 plan assumes that all new buildings are to be net zero energy, including no gas connections, beginning in 2022. Let's write that standard into this PUD ordinance. Alterum may object that this would limit rather than expand the pool of potential buyers of their 7.2 acres, and they may be right. But it would ensure that we get a buyer willing to build according to our community standards, which have been formally adopted by our city council. Still got 30 seconds. About PUDs in general, I think it's really a positive development that in this community, developers now realize if they want a PUD, they have to go all electric. We're seeing that time and time again. I think it's just become standard. I don't know why this project should be an exception. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Sorry to muddy the waters, but so be it.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
No callers or attendees have raised their hand.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no one speaking remotely, we will move to the proposed motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the ERIM 3520 Green Court Planned Unit Development Zoning Text Amendment, moved by Commissioner White and seconded by Councilmember Dish. We're in discussion. Would anyone like to kick us off?
I'll do a quick small one. If we can bring back up the presentation, Mr. Quasi, and then go to the slide that showed the existing regulations and then the proposed, and I think it was the second in that sequence.
This one?
Yes, sir. And then if you could put that up, because I can't actually see it on my screen because the viewers block it.
Yeah, I don't know why that. Oh,
That's
whoops.
okay.
Well,
If you,
sorry. Come on. There you go. Is that better?
yeah, oh, no.
Well,
But it's under no minimum building height requirements. Is there anything beyond requirements?
Wait.
Right now, it has a two-story minimum.
There actually is a building height requirement. No minimum building height requirement, I guess.
So there's no additional words after that?
Correct.
Okay, great. So that, I wanted to start there with my question, and I don't know what just happened after I asked you to do that, but it has now gotten worse on our screens.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, that wasn't.
I think he was trying to solve our visual problem, and now we can see ourselves and nothing else, which is okay. Why are we proposing, or did staff have a conversation with the petitioner? Oh, that's much better, thank you.
Yes.
To remove the minimum building height requirement, because this means on the whole parcel, if they were to tear down any building and reconstruct, they could reconstruct a single-story building, which if TC1 is coming to this area,
Right.
that would be sort of out of scope. So is there a rationale for why we would remove the two-story minimum, which is present in TC1, from this PUD since it already exists and would match the district that's coming?
Yeah, I would also defer to the petitioner on that one.
Well, I wanted to start with staff in
No,
case.
I appreciate that, but no, I think a two-story minimum is okay at that location.
Okay.
I know that you guys had revised that to be the one-story, but I don't think that was a strong discussion point at the time.
No, I think that was not something that was particularly important. I think that my strong suspicion is that whatever happens here is going to be multi-story, trying to facilitate the use of the property.
But that's not the requirement of the PUD. So, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. Unless we write it in, someone will come in and say, I can build a single story, and the PUD will permit it, and there is nothing we can do to prevent that.
Yeah, I think that, my recollection is that might have been something that was suggested to kind of just get rid of a lot of old language, but
Yeah, it
correct.
could have been, but I think overall, we would, staff does support the two-story minimum, and I would look to the petitioner, that's something we can amend here, if it was okay. Obviously, this has to go to council, so we have ability to make amendments, if it's agreeable. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
I don't think that's
do
an
agree with
issue.
the TC1 that was discussed briefly with the petitioner about going to the TC1 district instead of a PUD. So, but again, the PUD has different advantages with it. So, yes, that's something that commission could certainly get behind and recommend at this point.
Do I need to make a formal motion to strike the no minimum height, building height requirement?
I don't think so. I don't think you need to make a formal motion. We can note that as you can make it as a
Is there
condition.
agreement at the table?
Correct.
Yeah.
Is there
Seems like
agreement
there's
at the table?
Generally friendly.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Unless, okay.
I'll
So,
start.
yes, we can certainly,
I'll start
I will
and
make
stop
note
there.
that that item will be amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Abrams.
While we have this slide up, I think that there might be a discrepancy between what I'm reading in the supplemental regs and what I see on this slide, so I want some clarification. On the slide, it says front setback 25 feet from the edge of Green Road.
Yeah, I did notice that.
It's
It does-
15 in the document. And it says south edge, the slide says 25 feet along the south property boundary, and the supplemental regs say 30.
Yes, that's, well, so again, I don't know, fortunately, we did have the 15 has been in there for a while, so both of those, I think it might have just been a typo in the, again, unless David, the petitioner disagrees, I think that, but the supplemental regulations is what you guys had reviewed and agreed to, so I think the presentation is.
I agree. That's entirely my fault. I apologize. Good eyes, good catch.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Yes, but thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
The slide is wrong. The
Correct.
supplemental regs document is correct.
Are correct, yes. The supplemental regs are something that had been reviewed previously, correct.
Thank you. That's it for now.
And to clarify, it's 15 feet, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what's in the supplemental regs right now. That's what we revised consistent with the office district. That's why we went to that number.
Gotcha. And as a point of clarification, the side setback is 30 feet. So, yeah, just,
Correct.
okay. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I have two things quickly to start. The curb cuts. I only see one. Where are the two? Is the north one
Yes,
on?
they're both, yes.
That is on the Alterum site.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, the line doesn't quite go that far up, but the property line goes to the middle, correct.
Okay. I thought I was reading something in here that there's, maybe not in there, in somewhere that was like some sort of easement, but.
Yes, there is an easement that goes back to the hotels behind there.
Okay,
That is
okay.
correct.
Okay.
There is, because there's adjacent access to all of these other, there's a couple of hotels, including the hotel that's off of Plymouth.
Yep. Yep.
I say the Holiday Inn, but I don't know what it is now.
Yeah, I don't remember. Okay. Okay, so that's the max curb cuts, no more curb cuts, they can relocate a curb cut, but that's it. Since this is a PUD, and PUDs, we talk about public benefits. Since it's an existing PUD, but we're amending the PUD, do we still need to analyze this in terms of public benefits?
Yep, absolutely,
Yeah.
because you're still, I don't want to say re-upping, but yeah, you're still reauthorizing the PUD to the standards of today.
Yeah.
Correct, and which is why we've tried to highlight certain benefits that we've called out, but yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay. I mean, I fully support more development on this site. I live by here. I think it would be great for, more residential, more anything. I would love to see it more like TC1 where it's pulled up to the curb. So I want to think about like the setbacks and the building frontages and stuff, but to the point of electrification too, like those are things that we're asking for in PUDs and that we're getting. So I mean, I know like what to the petitioner or staff, like was it discussed that like, new development within this would need to be all electric? Was that ever a conversation?
I prefer to, it was brought up that it would probably be a comment from planning commission. Exactly.
You know us so well.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I don't believe it was brought up when we were before the Planning Commission to present, previously to present this. I did hear a discussion about it tonight. Obviously, we haven't done any real analysis of that. We don't know who will purchase and what they will build. Obviously, we'll be back before the Planning Commission if and when there's a site plan for review, and that will require, if I'm correct, say, an amendment to the PUD again. So I think...
Well, it may not require, it will definitely require a site plan, but if it's consistent with the zoning, it would still be a full site plan, but it would go to Planning Commission. But it may tweak the amendments, the PUD, but...
Okay, but it will be back in front of the Planning Commission.
For a site plan.
For a site plan review. Certainly that we can explain, I think, to whoever is interested in purchasing the remaining lot, that that's a consideration that the Planning Commission is going to be looking at, certainly.
But we can't require it then.
You probably couldn't require it, but you could certainly indicate that that's something that would be
But we could
relevant
write
to your
it
decision.
in now.
We could.
Okay.
Yeah, we have not done any review of that to date, no.
Okay. I'm going to leave that with that for now.
Councilmember Dish.
So, yeah, two other wish list items off of Kirk Westfall's wish list. I don't know why we don't accept the suggestion of prohibiting street-facing parking.
That's something that you could. I mean, we didn't as staff discuss it. I did not discuss that with the petitioner. I didn't go into that level of kind of detail. But absolutely, as a commission, if that's something, same as with the other issue we brought up that we were going to change.
The two-story minimum.
Correct. That can also be discussed and discussed with the petitioner and brought up as well.
Yeah, well, I would like to put that on the table. Clearly not that existing parking should be ripped up unless it's being substantially altered, but development on the vacant part, it seems like there's no reason to have street-facing parking
So basically,
there.
by street-facing, you mean, so no parking in front of a building, more or less? Like, there has to be a building screening it, correct? Okay, so, again, that's something, I would look to the petition, if what our council member planning commissioner is pointing out in the supplemental regulations would be a restriction to have parking, no parking in front of buildings along Green Road. Yes, that'd be correct.
Well, I'm just, and the reason I bring this up is because when we last discussed this, which was about a year ago, we talked about why it wasn't being rezoned TC1. And it was an interesting answer that we had there, that there might be some benefits that we could get. If not, that if we zone this TC1, the existing buildings would be non-conforming with that. But also that aspects of this project are looking forward to TC1. And I liked that sentence in my notes. And so I thought perhaps we should think about as many aspects of what we're doing now to look forward to TC1 would be nice. And then the only other one, and this conflicts with what I have just said, but the other one that Mr. Westfall brings up is protecting the trees that are now shading that very long sidewalk along Green. And a setback of 25 feet would probably do a better job, but that was an error. So, so we have a setback of 15 feet, and that is probably not adequate to protect that lovely stand of trees. I don't know if they're, I'm not an arborist. They are large. I don't know if they're special in any way, but they do produce shade along a pretty exposed area by virtue of it being across from a really large concrete, what's on the other side of the street is a really large concrete thing. And so those trees are pretty nice. And I think I would be, so if we can, I know that goes against the idea of we just want to build up to the front lot line, but we're also debating that as well. So, okay, so those are the two things that I wanted to put on the table, the front-facing parking and do we care enough about the line of trees?
Sorry, and sorry, if I could just add one thing, because it triggered my memory as well that I wanted to mention is that, right, one thing to keep in mind with these supplemental regulations, and you touched on this, there are existing buildings in this PUD right now. So that is one thing that we have to consider. A lot of times with a PUD, you're dealing with a vacant site or, a site to be completely remodeled. But these PUDs, I meant, it applies to the entire, now again, that doesn't necessarily have to change any direction you're going. I just wanted to make sure that's clear. And then regarding the trees along there, that is something that, well, at least staff, I internally debated about reducing that setback, knowing that those trees were there. But again, looking at how we were, like with TC1, how we're putting, things a little bit closer to the street. And so that, again, was a good point for discussion at Planning Commission, in which direction we want to go. And I don't know necessarily whether 25 feet would protect the trees or 15 feet would necessarily kill them. I didn't go into that level of detail.
Thank you. Commissioner Salve.
So maybe I'll address that and say, I believe it's a minimum setback. And so the building could set back further. And if we reviewed a site plan, a alternative arrangement plan may have to be shown relative to the change of natural features. So if they demoed all of the trees to fit the sidewalk and the building very close, we could evaluate that in terms of harm or good. Similarly, if we allowed the flexibility at 15 feet, maybe a piece of the building, such as an entrance, could protrude, we could lose a couple of trees and the thing could jog back or something. And so I'm comfortable with leaving it and giving the flexibility for design, and that we could evaluate it with natural features at a site plan level later on. But I do want to add, relative to maybe the kind of alignment with TC1, and that also the 2021 building code is finally getting reviewed, and that we might be looking at 75 feet instead of 55 feet for tall buildings now. And so this asks for the 65 feet, and I'd recommend it aligning at 75 feet maximum height, maybe even striking the stories. This is my comfort level, so I put it to the table, just to meet similar to TC1, which is at the 50 and 75 feet. And then it also aligns with the building code so that we're not having kind of difference in height restrictions between zoning and building code. So I offer that to the table.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you for noticing me, because this follows immediately onto that. I was curious about the 65 feet because that doesn't seem to line up to anything in the height table. Everything is 55 feet and 2 stories or something different. And I was similarly curious about, in most of the situations where it is 55 feet, there is some reference to nearby residential. And I know, again, a lot of the attention is on the parcel that's farther from residential, but following through kind of the 55 within 80 feet of residential and 75 within 80 to 300 feet within residential, I think, again, borrows from another district that this might be realistic to or related to. And I was just curious about why in a lot of the office district, there's a step down when it's a budding residential, and since that, I double checked to make sure that the residential to the south is residential zoned. So was that part of the discussion?
Reducing the height next to the residential? No, it was not.
Okay. In my mind, this like balance of going to meet what is common in the other areas. I know it would be a reduction from what's proposed, but it's not a reduction from what is there right now within 80 feet, and then going up to what Commissioner Sauvé suggested, 75 for what is the majority of that site, makes me feel like it's more in keeping with what's there. But I'm curious from the petitioner's perspective, like if that's a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I think that the decision was made to increase the height based on comments about how to make the parcel generally better use of the property. So it was basically based on feedback that we received. I don't think there's any objection with making the height taller and/or limiting the height in relation to residential adjacent districts to the proposed height and taller in other areas. I don't think either one of those is necessarily problematic. I don't know, Tracy, if we need to speak with any of the other folks in the PUD to get feedback on those sorts of ideas, but I don't think we would have any objection to that.
I mean, to be clear, my understanding, again, I got to pull up the other one, but the 55 feet within 80 feet is still more than what's currently allowed at all.
Correct.
So it would, it's still, again, more than what's there, and this would allow even higher, kind of farther from that southern property line. So.
Sure, and it's a PUD, so I think there's, some policy decision-making about, whether or not the city wants to try to, make the best use possible of the property, but there hasn't been a ton of discussion about higher height or a different height at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had another note. Let's see. I appreciate the, so I'm interested in that. I would be interested in making, now we're talking about 3 changes to height, adding a minimum height, increasing the maximum height overall except within 80 feet of residentially zoned property, to keeping that at 55 to match whatever's in the rest of here. And I don't care about the story stuff, so.
I'm sorry, you said to match to 55? The existing says 50.
I know.
You meant 55 from office, correct?
55 from office and from almost everything else within the table in the current zone.
55 feet office within 80 feet.
75 everywhere except within 85 feet of residential.
80.
80 feet of residential, sorry, and then being 55.
55 over 80.
With that residential zoning.
Yes, within resident.
I think that's right. I think that is how the TC1 is drafted, and that's how a lot of this works.
Yes, that's similar.
Yep. I appreciated too the discussion, the reminder about why keeping it in a PUD. I actually looked, I was like, I don't remember discussing this. It's because it was MAP last year. And so I was up north at the MAP conference. So I wasn't there. So sorry. But I think this for me, so I trust that conversation happened. I'm thinking about what are the benefits? And part of me, but also saying this is why I don't love PUDs generally, because they come out of date, because we're making it current with what is happening now. And so it's interesting to me that there are uses that are allowed here that we don't allow the combination of uses anywhere else. That is very interesting to me. I don't know, though, based on what we're hearing, that that's actually what we're going to get. And so I would just say, this is what happens. I appreciate pegging it to the things that are currently required in our code, because I had lots of questions about EV charging and all of those things, dark skies compliance and all of these things. And so even so, if it were a standard zoning district, that would keep up with the times as we're going overall. So I'm not saying in the way of this, but just noting it for everyone's benefit.
Thank you. Commissioner Weatherby.
Yeah, just a couple things. One, I think the height makes sense to sort of tie it to other districts, but also this is on the north side of the housing, and so whether it's 55 or 65 or 75, it's not going to block sun, it's not going to really look that different to the 3-story buildings behind it. So that's just, I don't have a strong feeling, but if 20 more feet gives us a lot more opportunity, then I don't think it's really infringing. If somebody on their first floor apartment is looking out, it's going to look the same whether it's 55 feet or 75 feet from their point of view, and it is on the north side. So, but then the other thing that I did notice is the public benefit. Really, the only public benefit other than an interesting mix of uses is the affordable housing premium. I'm not going to say premium, but, and there is no guarantee. I mean, this could very easily be medical manufacturing. I mean, and would make a lot of sense in that area to, manufacture face masks or vaccines or whatever. So there is no guarantee that affordable housing or housing at all would ever be there. And so for that to be kind of the only public benefit is, it doesn't necessarily sit well with me as a really strong benefit. It's great if housing is built, but there is really no guarantee, because we've added other uses in addition to housing for this site.
Thank you.
May I just-
Would the petitioner like to respond to that?
Just briefly, because I thought there were some really good comments there. Interestingly, we did hear from another owner in the PUD that is an office owner, that they would actually have interest of considering potentially in the future looking at a residential use, even in lieu of existing office. So the couple things you mentioned there, in terms of making the height uniform throughout the project would probably help facilitate that, was one thought. And then the other thought, I guess, is, the fact that there has been expressed interest in potentially doing housing on this vacant site, and existing, other existing current office users considering housing as well. I realize that that's a limited public benefit in relation to other types of public benefits, but I do think it's material in terms of the impact of a 15 to 20% affordable housing component, if in fact housing does materialize, as we've seen interest in actually happening on the site. That's it. Thank you.
If I could just add a little bit, I mean, we did internally as staff, we discussed with Mr. Leonard, as well as, that the question that you just kind of touched on, which is that residential, right, is not required. But it's a slippery slope where we try, how could we require it, like just on the new parcel, or like part of the old, again, dealing with all these other existing uses. It was really tricky. So again, not to say that the Planning Commission can't recommend things. I mean, absolutely, we can work within that. But that was something that we did debate. Again, it wasn't something that we put forward to the petitioner because we just didn't. It was challenging in itself. And again, to write something that necessarily require it, we get into, but acknowledging that the public benefit would only be achieved with that use or that public benefit. But, again, we're trying to make it a little bit more liberal rather than trying to restrict things down, even though I understand that housing is what we all really want to see on the site. But that is correct. It's not a required use.
Commissioner White.
So I appreciate Commissioner Weatherby's raising of the public benefits, because I would agree also with the public comment from Mr. Garber that there aren't very many public benefits in this PUD. Dare I say, any. And I wonder, so if I can get a better framework, because this is an existing PUD, that we are making text amendments or changes to permit more uses. And we're trying at the same time to bring aspects of the PUD to match our existing code, but that's not required. So they would have a right to leave the PUD as it is and just come and ask for the additional uses and not have to meet our EV charging, not have to meet our dark sky.
No, I mean, I think I understand, but they still have to do a site plan, which has all those requirements.
When a site plan comes, but that's only triggered by the site plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, all the application of those ordinances.
And it would not apply to the other built infrastructure that's inside the PUD unless they brought a new site plan in, because that would be the only place that we could make those changes.
Right. Would it correct, like if EV parking, well, I'm trying to think through this, if it was a requirement.
So it would only come if they made a change.
It would depend on how this particular PUD supplemental regulations are crafted.
Right.
If if tonight's project fails, the existing PUD does remain, and they are entitled to build under the current supplemental regulations.
Right, so they could build their mass manufacturing.
And I would say that the benefits discussion should be what the proposed changes are. They could propose to fully revamp the planned unit development supplemental regulations, and I understand they have to an extent. They have not, correct me if I'm wrong, they have not said we will retroactively apply, say, electric vehicle parking. But also, it doesn't seem like the PUD has been labeled as phases for this vacant piece. These are the requirements for it. We have a sort of a hybrid approach. There's nothing that's off the table per se, but to be clear, what they are proposing that to change the supplemental regulations, and the new requirements would be immediately effective, but they only apply to when a site plan
So that becomes the trigger. The trigger is the site plan. So I am correct in my understanding that they could reparcel the land, sell it, and then the new owner could come and request a zoning change from PUD to something else.
Yeah, that could happen with or without tonight's change.
So, and just help me as I'm going to do a commissioner dish. I'm even going to use the fingers. I just want to better understand what I don't understand. And sorry if that wasn't fair to how you articulated it.
Totally.
So there are benefits to the current holder of the PUD for us to make these changes, as opposed to us rejecting these changes and then having the owner either have to decide to parcel out the land and request a new zoning. And so, because I'm just trying to understand like the framework that we are presently under.
Correct. So I think if I understand, so, right, say the existing, so one of the options could be for the petitioner, if you left the existing zoning in place as a PUD, the petitioner could withdraw, with the permission of the other, pull this out of that PUD district and rezone it as R40 or whatever. I mean, that is an option that I think was briefly looked at least initially, but again, and then the existing PUD would stay in place for the other ones.
Right.
But that was something that we as staff had looked at, and again, in cooperation with the petitioner, thought that it would be more valuable to bring the whole district up, acknowledging that there's challenges with that, but maybe getting some new things. Again, we were looking towards most likely the potential uses of residential, but that's not necessarily true. But overall, like I said, we did feel that there was advantages to bringing the whole PUD district rather than advising them to pull that parcel out and rezone it to something else.
Okay. Yeah.
I hope that answers. Thank you, Alexis. I
No,
hope that answers your question between your
it answers my question. I think what I'm trying to parse is because this is such a artifact from past zoning being brought forward, there are advantages that are built in for this PUD that wouldn't exist if we were looking at a new PUD. So if they were bringing this PUD to us today, this would have to meet, section F of 5.29.11, and there are 7 points under there. The open space requirement, the innovation of the use of the design and the layout and the type of structures, the economy and the efficiency of the land use, the preservation of the natural features, the employment shopping district, as well as the use or reuse of existing sites. And none of that is really under consideration as we consider these changes.
Right, for the proposal, correct.
Right. Okay, that's what I thought.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Abrams.
I would like to continue having the conversation around public benefit, but first maybe I also want to just have a conversation around potential detriment, I guess, and make sure we're protecting against that. So I wanted to talk about parking maximums and maybe learn a little bit about how those were determined, because they seem high to me, and I would support lowering them, but I didn't know if they were, so some of them are zones where there currently is no maximum, some of them are zones like office where there is, and it matches that, or uses, sorry, not zones.
Like, one thing I can say to the parking is that many of those are what was in there exists. There actually was a no more than in the current requirements. The only thing that staff, we did change to one, and it was actually two per dwelling unit for multifamily, and we just knocked it down to 1.5, which again, I think I probably have mentioned, but parking would be a discussion issue as well, as far as the parking maximum. But interestingly, there was already maximums in that section. But we didn't, so those are in place from the current proposal.
So I would be interested in a conversation around reducing those, if the petitioner's open to that conversation. I don't have any numbers to propose, like throw on the table, but we could talk about that. I think also I really want to add my voice in favor of something which prohibits street-facing parking in any redevelopment or future development. So those are the things that I think would be potentially detrimental, like more big seas of parking which are on green. And then in terms of the public benefit, I would like to have a serious conversation around electrification. So I don't know how to, it seems like maybe that's something you wouldn't be prepared tonight to commit to. So I'm not totally sure how to proceed on that, but maybe the first is to see whether fellow commissioners would support that.
On the topics of electrification, street-facing parking and parking maximums, would any other commissioners like to speak up in support of those changes? I could take those all three kind of separately. Commissioner, I'm sorry, it's a long name. Sadira, Clark. Sadira, sorry. Commissioner, Clark, sorry.
Yeah, I just support what Commissioner Abrams just brought up with the adding in something about the parking in front. And that.
Commissioner Mills.
So the parking in front is not allowed in a lot of our districts because we have a minimum setback, or maximum setback, I'm sorry. So in my mind, that actually, again, I like flexibility, but I don't see that as a benefit, a unique benefit to this zoning district. So I think that it should be included in the regulation, but I don't count that as a benefit. I would be very much in support of including full electrification as a benefit, because that's not something that we do require in any of our districts. You can't even get a height bonus, right? Like that doesn't even get you necessarily a height bonus. So, or you don't have to go that far in order to get the height bonus is the better way of saying it. So yes, that strong benefit, I can totally stand behind that. The other thing that, as you were talking, thank you, Commissioner Weatherby, for bringing up, like, yes, there's lots of things that could happen, and we're thinking about one particular use that might be beneficial, but there's nothing that ties it into that. I mean, one of the things, I don't love this, but I'm just going to say one of the things that was through my mind was you could cap the square footage of non-residential, but I don't like that, right? I don't like that at all. Exactly as you say, head's shaking. But I mean, if you want to make sure that any additional is residential, I mean, again, because though this is all together, it's tricky. But requiring residential is something that we do. Like we have, this is what we have in TC1, right? So for me, the thing that we know we can get out of this is electrification, and that's important no matter what, but it's really important to me, particularly if it's not residential, because, that requires a longer conversation, but I think that is really, really, really important. And that's something that we can, no matter what goes in this space, we could say is going to be a benefit. And justify a PUD because it's not in any of the other districts.
Thank you. So, Commissioner Mills, so it's safe to say that you would like to see that as an amendment to the PUD. Do I have a friendly second on that? Seems like Weatherby, Commissioner Salve, White. Okay. All right. I'm going to, any other commissioner want to add in at this point in time? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I support that too. I think I have a clarifying question. I don't even know who I'm asking this to. So this is a 5-parcel site, right? And we're saying full electrification on the whole site. So like anything new, obviously, would need to be electrified. At what point is it like any sort of renovation? I'm thinking about the existing structures that are on the site. They would then be like non-compliant, I'm assuming, if they have anything that triggers this. Okay, that's my question.
I'm sorry.
Anything that triggers a site plan
would
happening on the site would then be
Correct.
subject
We're not
to.
going to retroact, even for renovations, right, we wouldn't, it would,
It would depend on if, yeah.
yeah, we'd have to word it, but, right, we could word it in a way that wouldn't affect the existing.
Well, I mean, I'd want it to affect the existing if anything happens to the existing, but yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I support that as like the 5th or 6th.
Got it. Thank you. Commissioner Hammerschmidt. Do we have other discussion items? Commissioner Weatherby.
And I think probably everyone understands this, but I just wanted to point out that the expansion of the permitted principal uses would include medical and dental offices, which are currently prohibited, and expand the definition of hotel, which is now like only extended stays bigger than 100.
We just allow all hotels. Yeah.
Right, and permit residential. So just that we are actually adding a lot of potential uses to this, which, I mean, that's something that we're giving a lot of potential uses. And I think some of those are probably as, definitely medical and dental offices would be a big thing over on that parcel.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? I'm going to look to recap a little bit here and see where we're at. Let's take a little bit of a count. So prohibition of street-facing parking. There was discussion regarding kind of the frontage of the maintenance of the trees relative to the building frontage. One of the things that I'll add is, to me, that's kind of the new urbanist concept of trying to make it more interesting, slow down traffic if you bring buildings closer. And I think a lot of that has to do with making pedestrians feel safer. So are trees sufficient in that, that end? So I think that's still kind of, up for debate, but there's discussions around frontage. One of the things that I wanted to mention on that street to the north is C1B and C1, which is actually a 10 feet setback. So from my standpoint, I was thinking about what does the continuity of that zone look like? So that's one thing that I also want to make sure that commissioners take into account. So we have frontage, street-facing parking, electrification, the requirement thereof. We talked about height, making it consistent with the TC1 zone, so increasing maximum height to 75 feet unless within 80 feet of residential. And then I think we have a larger thematic question, at least the one that I think people have been kind of grappling with is this a PUD amendment? Can this be achieved in another different zone? And then this question about, what are the sufficient public benefits? So the sufficiency of electrification, one of the things that I will mention is that in the past, we did have Sartorius come here. If they are doing lab, it is difficult when you have larger cooling requirements, et cetera. So just the vast variety of uses, electrification, the grid requirement for us to sit here and say we don't necessarily know what that substation can hold, to say that's required. We may be prohibiting some uses without us actually knowing it. So I think a little more due diligence is required on all parties in that respect. Taking a look, so I think that's kind of the items that I see as discussion points that we've had so far. The things that I wanted to add. We are in the midst of a new comprehensive plan currently. In fact, there's a new public announcement that's going to happen at the end of this meeting as well. That being said, the best thing we have right now is a 2009 land use plan as a part of our comp plan. So when you take a look at that, it does say mixed use for that. So it says commercial to the north, mixed use, research to the east, resi to the south. And so for me, I think the challenge is, does this actually adhere to the land use plan that we've come to as a community. And so the challenge I have is it going to result in the mixed use, right? Because it could be any one of the myriad it really is a wide palette of uses. So I think that's the challenge I have kind of going into this. So that is just my feedback as far as the application of the 2009 land use plan. Is it going to result in the mixed use that we want? Mr. Kowalski, I do have a question procedurally on PUDs. When I look at the PUD in the UDC, the Unified Development Code says that a revision of PUDs refers back to the PUD section. And it should be accompanied with a site plan. So for me, it's kind of tough to say, like, how can we kind of evaluate with how, did you guys come to that, did you have that discussion internally?
Yes, I mean, it can be unless no development is proposed.
Yeah.
And then there's that exemption that the planning manager can waive the area plan or site. Well, it'd be an area plan. So any rezoning typically above single or two family has to come with either an area plan or a site plan. So the planning manager does have the ability to waive that. So in this case, again, since we didn't have anything proposed at the time, that was the case. So correct. This one does not obviously have a site plan with it.
Sure. And so to try and judge the merits of these proposed changes without having kind of a clear site plan, that's a little tricky, especially with the infinite permutations of uses that we see here. I agree with Commissioner Hammerschmidt's first statement that we support densification, intensity of land use, productive use of land. I think that the proposed changes here may be challenging to reconcile in this short period of time, unless the petitioner can tell us, it seems like the commission would like to see, I'm going to recap again, electrification, that's probably a big one. Even though I'm saying here right now, in the past we have said for lab uses, restaurants, things that require high intensive heat, thermal load, et cetera, that require lots of cooling. There may be times where, we may not be able to accommodate that. We've said that in the past, but we do have an 820 climate goal, and we do need sufficient basis for public benefits. So electrification, street-facing parking, petitioner seems to be pretty friendly to that. The height you were friendly with. So I think it really comes down to, can we get a commitment, I think, from the petitioner on electrification? And let me just ask that question. Otherwise, I feel like this is probably headed to, I'm just reading the room and I'm trying to be practical about, like, hey, how do we proceed? So.
Yeah. Thank you, actually, for that summary. That was very helpful, I think, to kind of take some notes. It was a very good summary.
Yeah.
And I'll just note how we got here, because there's been a lot of new stuff discussed tonight, and I appreciate that. The initial concept was to say it would really be helpful in marketing the undeveloped site to expand some uses, and that's kind of where we started. We had some discussions with staff, and staff said, well, that's great. It would be good if we could update all of these kind of standards to current, lighting, EV parking, landscaping, setbacks, all that sort of stuff. And so there was a good comment made that, somebody could come in and develop under the existing PUD and not have to do any of that stuff. So we kind of view that, we do view that as a benefit, that would happen. So I think in light of all the new things, so that's how we got here. I just wanted to clarify. A lot of these changes were not things that we initially were proposing or thinking about. Given that some of the discussion tonight, I think it would be helpful for us to probably, if it would be something that the commission would consider, to table this, let us go and have some discussions about how some of these things, what the impact of these things would be, and see whether there are things that, see what we can find out. To your point, we have no idea about the capacity of the substation to provide for electrification of whatever uses may go in there, or, we certainly haven't discussed with existing owners the potential that they may have to rebuild their existing buildings to some of these standards that you've discussed tonight. So I think it would be our preference to have some time to go back, think about this, come back next month, tell you what we can and cannot do, and see if the commission wants to move forward.
Oh. Sorry, and to that point, I think I would second that, because I think with some of the changes, that most of these are no-brainers, but I would like to go into a little bit more depth on that, the electrification, and again, see how that affects, because most of our PUDs, like we say, are dealing with like a new parcel, basically, or a new building, and this has all these existing uses. So I want to make sure that, however, if that is the will of the commission as far as electrification, that how can we write that in there, that we don't create either nonconformities or limit things too much. So that's my thoughts.
Understood. So Commissioner Abrams.
I just want to make sure I understand. Everything there is going to be non-conforming in a lot of ways, right? No, there will be nothing will be,
Well,
like, once we change the PUD, the existing things will be non-conforming?
well, I think someone will want to go back and look through and be very clear about what the new standards are and how, and what they apply to, and for all the changes.
I don't think we'd be creating a lot of nonconformities as
Well,
they're
like you-
currently proposed.
Yeah,
because
the goal
everything-
would be not
we've
to
expanded
create.
like we've expanded setbacks, or not expanded, but we expanded height. So I don't think, looking through what we've proposed, I did think through that previously, that I don't think we've created any nonconformities as it stands now. Again, but however, I didn't go through, it's possible there's a medical office.
Well,
in
no,
this
so I
building.
think street-facing parking would be the one thing that we're talking about tonight that would produce that for
Well,
the one.
depending on how we
one
word
building.
that, correct. I mean, there could be a set, but yeah.
I guess I bring it up just to say, I already thought we were doing that, and I thought that was just part of the process, was accepting that in order to do this kind of funny thing where we're changing a PUD for multiple parcels, some of which are developed and some aren't, that producing non-conforming would be part of that process. I guess I was comfortable with that, so if that's something that's something I should be alarmed by, then maybe I would want to know that.
And we can have a better, if this is indeed postponed, obviously, I'm going to look into the issue of the non, and how that affects any of the existing parcels.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And because I certainly wasn't indicating that I thought the existing buildings needed to be retrofit to become electrified.
Okay,
It was just new construction. Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Based on the discussions here at the table, okay, I believe I'm looking for a motion then to postpone.
I move to postpone this to the second date of Planning Commission in October, the 17th.
I second.
And I think we do a vote, right? Just by show of hands? Show of hands? All right. Any opposed? Okay. Hereby, this is postponed to October 17th. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate it.
Yep. Okay, it is 9:15. How is everyone doing on energy? Should we keep going? Good? Good, all right. We are moving on to section 9C, regular business. I'm going to introduce a petition, 1710 Duvarin Road, Village of Ann Arbor amended site plan and rezoning for city council approval. Thank you again. An amendment to the approved site plan that includes rezoning of 2 parcels from township to R4A, multifamily residential, and an additional 120 residential units along Duvarin with an amenities park area and adjacent parking. The total units proposed will be 604 units on the 78.5 acre site. The parcels to be rezoned are 2520 and 2540 Pontiac Trail. The total area of rezoning is 5.9 acres. The staff recommendation is an approval, and we will start with petitioner presentation. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
I am back. Good to see you again. Tim Lockerman, Robertson Brothers Home, 6905 Telegraph Road. See a lot of familiar faces. Hello. Good to see you again. So tonight, yes, we're here, and I had alluded to this back when I saw you last, which I'm thinking was last year already. Time flies. That we'd come back with a site plan amendment for the remaining portion of the Village of Ann Arbor, which was previously approved, for 484 homes on Pontiac and Duvarin. So if we can skip to the next.
I'm trying to size this properly. I don't know why my screen isn't.
I think you can go to, under View, Matt, on the top left.
View, I got the view up.
Oh, no.
Nope. Sorry, there's a lag.
Read mode.
I think that's what we want. There we go. Okay, that's better. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Close
still a
enough.
little.
I may have to scroll up a little bit, but
Okay, perfect. So and I'll go quickly because I know you're all familiar with the project quite a bit. But the Village of Ann Arbor, and we are developing it in conjunction with DTN. They're our partners on the project. It's a large site. Obviously, you all know we had a lot of challenges to bring the project to fruition. Took a lot of time and effort and thought and help from you, help from the city council, and we appreciate. We're very happy with where we're at. Again, this is really that last step in the process, as we had been upfront about from the beginning. The site overall, we called it Village of Ann Arbor because we really believe it is a village. It's a concept with a lot of different types of housing options, ranging from the request here tonight, 685 square feet, up to about 1,850 square feet. Multiple bedroom types, that sort of thing. So you're going to see a lot of different types, real diversity of home buyers and renters. So there is a for sale and a rental component. Tonight, what we're talking about is just around 5 acres of the site, which is over about almost 80 acres. So it's a very obviously small portion of it. We'd really always envisioned, as you know, bringing in this additional area in the site plan. And in fact, our stormwater pond had been sized for it. So this was always something that we had planned. I want to go into detail, obviously, in a minute here. Your master plan density designation is 7 to 10 units per acre. It is zoned R4A, with the exception of the 2 parcels that are recently annexed, which is why we're delayed. We were delayed in bringing this additional portion in front of you tonight. But R4A, we are by right in that R4A zoning district. We have not asked for anything. This is not a PUD with any public benefit requirements. We did have a variance. We don't need it now if we can get tonight's site plan amendment approved, which, again, we'd always envisioned. So tonight, 120 rental units in this amendment is a total. That would bring the total up to 604 total. Again, for sale and for lease homes, just around 8 units per acre, which is right in that 7 to 10 band. The unit sizes tonight in the request, there's 685 square feet for a 1-bedroom and just over 1,000 square feet for 2-bedroom units. It is a stacked product, 3 stories, and overall open space, which is very onerous, is 65%. But I think it really adds to kind of what will draw people into this community. So why are we here? I've kind of alluded to it. It's to amend the overall plan for the Village of Ann Arbor. And we're asking really for just some specific things. The addition of the 120-unit for-lease portion, that is the area on Duvarn. And these areas have actually been already rezoned. A portion of it was previously zoned R4A. We had rezoned the other portion, Duvarn. I think it was probably official earlier this year or late last year. The rezoning request that is in front of you is for the 2 parcels that we had annexed in recently. And that's important because the delay in bringing you these 120 units on the plan really specifically was the length of time it took for those 2 parcels on Pontiac Trail to get annexed in. It's just a long process, as you well know. So we had moved forward with the rest of the project knowing that after we get annexed for those 2 parcels, which is official now, we'd come back in, and those are the 10 acres on Pontiac Trail. The reason we did that, A, for density, although I think we would have met the density without it, but really the open space. The open space of 65%, it's very difficult to do without buying additional land, so we had identified that. A long time ago, it just took time to get the annexation, so that really is the purpose, meeting your open space minimums. The majority of the site really does remain the same. We've made some what I'll call minor improvements to the southern portion, which I'll show you on the plan. And those improvements are really kind of just realigning some of the buildings, changing some of the access around the clubhouse, and an addition of a building path system on the former landfill, which of course is one of those challenges on the site, as long as we can get through Eagle. The other thing I'll point out on the site plan, which we're very excited about, is we're adding a very significant park amenity to the site, dog park, landscaped areas, pathways, community gardens, that sort of thing. So we're very excited. We always kind of thought of that as this is an area where we can do something really special on the site. So, and as I mentioned, this does eliminate a variance that we had already received. So the project highlights, I'm just going to go real quick on this. We've got the mix of residential land uses. We do have, I believe, quite a bit of green energy initiatives. We've got solar street lights, just to bring everybody back up to speed, BMP stormwater infrastructure, clubhouse solar panels, energy efficient appliances, and we did agree to the for sale portion being all electric. Again, that was not a requirement, but we felt that was very important to do. We've had a lot of conversations with you, with the city council, and also with quite a bit of the residents of your city. We've had a lot of private conversations, and I think we've really had a lot of good discourse between. And again, with family-oriented plans, and I won't talk about DTN and Robertson because you've heard me say it all. Next slide is the context plan. Everybody's familiar with it, I hope, but again, Duvar and Pontiac Trail. The things that maybe you may have forgotten, we are providing a new access to Leslie Park. The only access right now is from the Duvar on the Park subdivision, which is really kind of a private entrance. We will have private roads, but they are open. They'll be a public easement, so they'll function like city roads. We'll just maintain the, through our HOA and our leasing operation, the maintenance on those roads. So I think that's a win-win for the city, as a matter of fact. And also to the north to Olson Park. So we really like how that kind of connects the two parks. That's been something we've really liked from the very beginning. And you can see we've got R4A and R4B basically all around us. So we really do fit in that respect. The next slide, please, Matt. So this is the overall plan. It's basically almost identical to what you'd seen before, with the exception of the 4 buildings along Duvar, and that's 120 units, 4 30-unit buildings, all surface parked. And then essentially you can see those nature trails. I think I'd probably shown you that in a previous iteration, saying we don't know if EGLE will allow us. They have given us a thumbs up, but I don't have a permit for it. So we're still working through that, but we believe that we'll be able to meet all of their requirements to put nature trails, which will be open to the public. Again, better connection from Olson to Leslie Park. And then on the south side, if you can scroll down a little bit. We haven't touched any of the townhome, the for sale portion. The apartments on the south side, we just kind of cleaned up some of the dimensions of where those buildings are located just to make it more efficient, and then improve the parking around the clubhouse. And then I think the most exciting part is as you go west along where the apartments are, we've had that community amenity. I don't think this shows up very well, but we're very excited about that. So there'll be some natural areas, some special seeding, seed mix on some of the grass areas. As I mentioned before, our land planner geeks out on this, so he really kind of I think gave us a vision that we were hoping for on this. And then you can see a little bit of a community area, gazebo with some community gardens. So that's something that I think in a community this large is something that I think is really productive for the project. And then we'll still have a lot of open space. You can see all the way to Pontiac Trail, that'll stay open at this point, other than there'll be a single-family home that'll remain, and that's always been part of our plan there, and that'll stay with the seller. We do have quite a bit of wetlands. Of course, we already have a wetland permit, and I think it was like 0.04 acres, so we stayed out of that as much as possible. So I went quickly on that, but you've all seen it. So that's the overall plan. I just wanted to point out some of the improvements that we've made. The next slide just is a highlight of the new area. Again, it's close to Duvarn Road, which takes away that variance that we've received. You can see the elevations there. It is a stacked product. They are all rental units, all surface parked. We're meeting your new EV parking codes, which we went through at length with planning. And you can see there's kind of that little line there that is part of the landfill area. We do have a methane trench. I think I talked about that last time, which has been approved by EGLE. Kind of cuts up in this area, but of course away from the units themselves. We are providing quite a screen to the west side where there are some existing homes. We've had a lot of conversations with them. We've worked with those neighbors on a new easement so they can access this new road there. So I believe, and we've tweaked the site plan to, you can see, put some trees so they don't have buildings right against, right away from across from their entrance there. So we've worked closely with them as well. So that's the new site plan amended area. The next slide, again, is that little bit of a blow-up on that community park amenity. And I'm happy to go into detail on some of this, but I think you can tell this will be a great addition to the project overall. And then the next slide, and I showed you this before, so nothing's really changed. We did have a lot, I think, a lot of things that we added to this project that maybe we don't typically do, just because it was such a large site. So first and foremost, this is recycling a contaminated landfill. It's been sitting there. There's a reason why there's 70, 80 acres in Ann Arbor. Actually, we dropped it once, so I think I said that before. So it's hairy, but we got a handle on it. We're ready to get started. Of course, the all-electric component, which I know is very important to you, and those connections to Leslie Park. So I went through that fast, but I think you probably appreciate that, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We will go to staff presentation. Mr. Kowalski.
Get you a
Yeah.
good overall screen.
All good.
Sorry, I'm trying to make you all busy. Okay. Good evening again. I don't really have a lot to add. Interestingly, although it's not necessarily a small apartment or a small project with adding 120 units, it's kind of a small part of the overall site. So as far as like a site plan review, there wasn't there wasn't, as was mentioned, there's not a lot of changes elsewhere on the site. There's a couple of tweaks to building layouts and parking arrangements. Obviously, that was all looked at. As staff, we look at the entire site plan again because, excuse me, it's one site plan. So we had to look at everything again. So we did that. But as far as focusing in on the 120 units there, again, there wasn't a lot to really analyze there. It's heavily treed, but a lot of them are not landmark trees. There's a lot of, I hate to call any tree a junk tree necessarily, but there's not a lot of necessarily high quality features right in that area. And of course, everything's mitigated as required by code. Again, as was mentioned again, but just to reiterate, there is a rezoning involved with this as well. So this is a site plan that will go ultimately to City Council for final approval. The rezoning at those parcels along Pontiac Trail, basically, as was mentioned, those are annexed to get the land area basically to enable these units to be added along Duvarn. And that was that then nullified basically the variance that the petitioner had to get previously because of the max exceeding the setback in that area. So that now goes away. Again, as far as any other items worthy of pointing out, of all the existing sustainable elements, again, we just reiterate those are anything that was pledged for the first project as far as, like solar lights and all those kind of things for street lighting, that goes consistent with this new area that's being developed as well. And I think that kind of wraps up really my presentation, I think, at this time. Again, just reiterate the site plan and rezoning before you hear tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. We will move on to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the proposed Village of Ann Arbor amended site plan. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 or *6 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number and by name, if available, for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak at this time? Hello, welcome.
Thank you. We have a microphone? Okay. My name is Rich Fine. I live at 618 Duane Court. I'm a member of the Ann Arbor chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. I lead their building, electrification, and efficiency action team. Back in July of last year, you were told in a commission meeting that operating costs for heat pumps were much more than for gas. Yes, in Ann Arbor, utility costs for heat pumps are higher. It's due to our high electric rates and our low gas rates. But the burden to the renters is much less than what you heard. I apologize for going old tech on these, all right? Next time I'll be digital. The data tables that you have received show utility cost differences between gas and all electric for a for-rent townhome at the Village of Ann Arbor. This graph shows the cost differences per month between gas and electric. These calculations are from 4 different energy analyses. The main point is that the consistency across 3 of the 4 analyses indicates that additional utility costs for using a heat pump over gas in these townhomes is likely around $21 to $31 per month, rather than the much higher $93 per month shown in a report provided at that July 2020 commission meeting. Now, relating this to the 120 apartments at the Village, a preliminary analysis for its 2-bedroom apartments, and I will repeat preliminary, shows the cost difference is likely to average around $10 per month. Yes, every dollar counts for a renter, but where 71% of the city voted for a climate millage, we believe that most are willing to pay a little extra for cleaner heat. It's a very small percentage of the rent. Robertson Brothers should also consider that when the public disclosure component of A20's green rental housing program is implemented, gas will be a marketing liability. Other developments are being built with all electric. Why can't this? We all have to start moving out of our comfort zone to make changes that must be made. The passivity has to stop. We request that the Village 2 project, not permitted to move forward without further review of the potential for it to be all electric, or until the Planning Commission and the council develop a plan that incentivizes electric or otherwise averts new construction with gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present? Yes, please.
Hi, I am Dr. Larry Junk, 2128 Wallingford in Ann Arbor's Ward 3. I am a professor emeritus in U of M Medical School, here to speak against the plan of Robertson Brothers to incorporate gas furnaces and gas water heaters in the villages of Ann Arbor. I have no conflicts of interest. My comments today are directed both to the Planning Commission and to Robertson Brothers. As a physician knowledgeable about air pollution and climate change, I'm very concerned about the bad health consequences from climate change caused by the burning of gas. I'm also concerned about other consequences of climate change, including direct heat effects on humans, extreme weather events, extinction of animal and plant life. Virtually no educated person doubts the existence or seriousness of climate change, but recent events in the news highlight how serious this is. This summer was the hottest summer ever by a large margin. The oceans are the hottest ever by a substantial margin. In the past month, we've seen 3 severe storms with a probable relationship to climate change, including Storm Daniel, which has taken over 11,000 lives. Effects in Michigan have included flooding in Detroit and threats to Michigan agriculture. Atmospheric CO2 levels are the highest ever at 417 parts per million and rising steadily. Strong actions are needed. Ann Arbor's A20 plan is a strong plan with a realistic chance of success, provided homeowners and other involved parties cooperate. It calls for measures to make Ann Arbor carbon neutral by 2030. In 2022, a millage to fund this plan passed with over 70% of votes in favor. Robertson's plan not only doesn't comply with A20 plan, but it's an insult to the leaders of Ann Arbor and to our good citizens who strongly support this plan. With its gas furnaces and water heaters, the plan of Robertson Brothers appears to be geared toward their short-term profits, but against the long-term interests of their future residents and the people of Ann Arbor. In doing so, they have underestimated the people of Ann Arbor, who tend to be smart, caring about the community, and caring about the world around us. In addition to flying in the face of the A20 plan, Robertson Brothers' proposal to use 20th century heating and cooling technology will contribute to health problems in our citizens, as well as the health problems of climate change. It will leave homeowners paying higher monthly costs in the future, concerning that burning gas is less efficient than heat pumps for home heating and water heating. Also, that gas prices are unsustainable at their present level. It will lower the long-term value of these homes because of their inefficient 20th century technology. I urge the committee to do everything you can to steer Robertson Brothers in a better direction with this plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
I'm Melissa Spitz. I'm a tax-paying city resident, 809 Johnny Woods Drive. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I appreciate your work. This spring, I retired from A3C Collaborative Architecture after 25 years with some of the best sustainable designers in the region. For the prior 13 years, I worked in planning and design at St. Joe's. I recently started a retirement job for the A2 2030 district, continuing my work with Jane Culbertson, who I'm sure many of you know. I'm an artist with a lifelong passion for the natural world. I'm appalled by the folly of people who are blind to the worth of all other species. With this history combining science, art, and inclination, I'm here to beg you to do the right thing on Phase 2 of the Village Project and further at every opportunity. Please use your position to help end fossil fuel. Reject this site plan amendment until Robertson Brothers agrees to an all-electric plan for all units. You are not locked into approval. You could postpone, request more information, or simply vote no. I offer one example of many, Tim McDonald and Onion Flats Architecture, whose team has created dozens of phenomenally inspiring net zero multifamily developments, many for affordable housing. You don't build affordable housing with overly costly tech. The proven technology is in use right now. We are in a climate emergency, not in the future, right now. We must stop business as usual. You can make this simple choice to insist that all new developments be built all electric. City Council recognized the climate emergency, and tremendous effort has been put into the incredibly ambitious A20 plan. It's not perfect, but it's such an excellent framework. Any new fossil fuel plans negate this work, and we are not meeting those ambitious goals. I'm told the developer plans to build in capacity to switch these apartments from gas to electric in the future. When? These appliances will last from 8 to 20 years, gas appliances. Working in this field all my life, I can tell you that switch won't happen before that. If you must see it only in terms of dollars, look at the long-term cost. The fossil fuel damage in this plan would dwarf any negligible cost of the electric alternatives. Finally, back to art. I believe at this critical time in human history, we must recharge our imagination. There are so many astonishing, inspiring efforts underway all over the world to implement solutions. We need all of these efforts. We have to search for them, build on them, and align our imaginations. It's not too late. We can do this, but we must do it now.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello, I'm Donald Levitt. I live at 218 West Kingsley Street. I'm here to voice my opposition to the use of natural gas in the Village of Ann Arbor, Phase 2. I'd like to tell you about my personal story as to why I feel so strongly about this. My story is in 2 chapters. Chapter 1. On May 7th, I hosted the first annual A2 Climate Teach-In at Genesis in Ann Arbor. Mayor Christopher Taylor was our opening speaker. Professor Shelley Miller was our closing speaker. We had 6 breakout sessions and 16 tables staffed by local climate action organizations. We were sponsored by 8 congregations: Beth Israel Congregation, Blue Ocean Church, First Presbyterian Church, First Unitarian Universalist Congregation, St. Clair's Episcopal Church, St. Francis of Assisi Parish, Temple Beth Emeth, and Zion Lutheran Church. All of these congregations are concerned about climate change, and there are certainly others. Now, hearing this, you might think that I'm knowledgeable about climate action. I'm not. I'm a total novice. It was only 18 months ago that I really gave this any thought. Chapter 2. 2 years ago in 2021, my wife and I moved into one of the new condos in Carytown. There are 51 units in the building, all with gas heat. Here's the point of my story. When we moved in 2021, I didn't pay any attention to the fuel used to heat the condos. It wasn't on my radar screen. Then I got interested in climate change, and now I'm frankly horrified that I live in this gas-powered condo. It's a beautiful building and a great location. We love it, but damn, I wish I had thought of this before we moved in. My point is that many people in Ann Arbor will be like me. The 250 people at my teach-in will be like me. They won't pay any attention to the gas versus electric issue until they do pay attention to it, and then they'll be mad, like me, that the builders could not look even a little bit into the future and see that gas-fueled heat in this day and age is ridiculous and vastly destructive. It's wrong. We all know it's wrong. And a couple of years from now, people will look back at this so-called controversy about continuing to install gas and wonder why it was even considered. It's time that we stop installing gas now, not only at the Village of Ann Arbor, but for any new construction. We can't stop this one development at a time. We need a comprehensive process that steers developers away from gas and to full electrification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you very much. My name is David Girk. I'm from 1315 South Maple Road on the west side of town, and I'm representing Washtenaw Climate Reality this evening. I understand that this is your opportunity to consider Phase 2 of this project. With Phase 1, a lot of us did come here or write letters, and we asked for you to compel the developers to use purely electric means to heat the property. And as I understand it, you went through with the approval anyway, and it went to the City Council for them to pass. So you might wonder, what's different now? What's changed now? What's happened? Why are we bothering to come again? If it happened before, presumably you'll do the same thing this time. What's happened this time is the summer of 2023. I'm sure you've all been reading about it every day, hearing about it in the news. We've been breaking heat records everywhere. 31 straight days over 110 degrees in Phoenix. Nearly the entire summer over 100 degrees in Austin, Texas. Not only in our summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, but in the winter, which is going on right now in the Southern Hemisphere, they're breaking all sorts of records. It's not just a matter of breaking records, it's demolishing records, obliterating records, not by hundredths of a degree, but by a quarter of a degree. That might not sound like too much. A quarter of a degree Celsius, that is a gigantic differential when you're talking about going above what the previous record was. And it's not just a matter of numbers, it's also a matter of consequences. We had the fire, the wildfires in Hawaii. Now, was that all because of climate change? No, they had invasive grasses there which really were not properly adapted to the area, but climate change is always a threat multiplier. It dried, they had a drought there, they had excessive heat there, everything was dried out, and when the fire came, it just spread literally like wildfire. Just a couple, I guess it was about a week or two ago, or probably not even 2 weeks ago, probably 1 week ago, in Libya, they had that horrible flooding situation. Now, we all know the dams broke, and a lot of that was because they weren't maintained properly. Much of it was because it was an inordinate amount of rain. Just today, the World Weather Attribution Service said that the rains were 40% greater, heavier than they would have been in the absence of climate change, and that the breaking of the dams was 50 times as likely as it would have been in the absence of climate change. I'm just saying, things are different now. Had it been 10 years, okay, had it been 10 years, okay. Okay, please, I'm just going to echo what my colleagues said earlier. Please don't let this through. And I want to thank the developers for making the change that you did with regard to putting in heat pumps in the condo aspect of it. But this is a different era now. We are not in the era of half measures. We must stop the use of fossil fuel completely at this point. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak?
Thanks, Chair Lee. Ken Arbor again, 28 Haverhill Court. I won't try to match the eloquence of the previous speakers. I just want to raise a few points. The 164 for sale homes, they'll be all electric. The solar street lights and the clubhouse solar. I don't know how widely known this is, but you and I are paying for that, not the developer. It's been incorporated in the brownfield plan for this site. $1.32 million for the heat pumps, $440,000 for the solar panels, plus $1.171 million in carrying costs for the above. So developer, in my mind, doesn't get points for this. And I personally think that we, as the public, should not be paying for something that developers should be doing already. I've spoken, I counted 14 separate times on the Village project dating back to December 2021. All for the same reason that the previous 5 speakers just did. I understand everyone's position on this. The developer, it's a speculative project. You know, they see risk. It's a big project. They have to pay off their construction loan. They have an internal rate of return they have to achieve. Why add what they perceive as, an extra risk onto this? This commission, I know you badly want electrification. We saw that with the Alterum discussion. I thank you for that. I'm really grateful that it looks like you're going to require that of that developer. I realize that once this zoning is approved, this becomes an all-right project, and you feel that you can ask for it here, but you can't require it. Because there's nothing that addresses this in the UDC. All this is true. Everyone is right, okay? But the net effect is more and more emissions, globally, nationally, locally. Our latest inventory show that local emissions are up for the second year in a row. We must take collective responsibility for this problem, including average Americans like me with our huge carbon footprints. Someone has to own this. Maybe that time and place is here tonight. I asked Robertson Brothers, Mr. Loughran, for the 14th time to go all electric. This is a good developer and this is a good site plan. Like I say, I understand their point of view, but I ask you to take what you perceive to be a slight additional risk to this project. It is harder to go all electric, but do it for the planet. If they don't, I ask you as a planning commission to take an expansive view of your responsibilities Something has to change.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak? Seeing no one else, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
We have 3 total callers with their hands raised. I'll go in the order on my screen. Caller ending in 534. Where's my mouse? You have permission to speak to the Planning Commission. Please unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is Tom Stolberg, calling from 1202 Traeger Street in Lower Town, Ann Arbor. Let me start with what I like about this project. It meets the density in the comprehensive plan, 7 to 10 units per acre, and it has a nice variety of housing types. I really like that aspect of the project, the for sale and the for rent, and the different housing structures, typology. I think that's an excellent part of this plan. I've spoken to the Planning Commission in the past, and City Council, Energy Commission, Environmental Commission, even the ZBA, anybody to speak to ask for essentially a carbon impact statement on every single development that comes before you. If we are going to meet net zero by 2030, we need to know the numbers to plug into that great big spreadsheet we must have, because every time we approve something that's powered by gas, then there's a deficit that we're going to have to make up somewhere else. If it's your intention to approve this with the gas appliances, then we need to know that number to plug into that big spreadsheet, so we know what we have to make up elsewhere in order to hit that net zero. And we should be doing that for every single project. So I hope I can influence Planning Commission to put some pressure on whoever it is that's going to make that decision to require carbon impact statement on every single project. Whether you vote no or vote yes, we need to know, so we know how we're doing on meeting that net zero. Recently, we approved a plan at Lower Town Phase 3 for 200 apartments that are going to be gas, heating, gas, water heat. They said maybe they might switch to electric dryers. Your former chair of the Planning Commission was essentially pleading with the developer to please do better. In that case, we had the leverage, demand that they do better. I think some people did not understand conditional zoning well enough to know at the time that the developer had conditions upon them, and they were asking to have those taken off, and we had the leverage to demand better in terms of sustainable building on that project. We're not always going to have that leverage, but when we can, we need to use whatever influence we have if we're going to achieve that net zero. And I really want to thank all of the articulate speakers that preceded me today. Thank you all for showing up in person. I'm sorry I did not. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next speaker, Luis Vasquez. You are now allowed to speak. You have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
Yes, thank you. Luis Vasquez, 909 Barton Drive. Practically a neighbor of this development, this proposed development. It's hard to balance the extreme need for housing in Ann Arbor with the need for sustainability. Just as you spent a bit of time talking about the Green Road PUD just before this 9C on your agenda, you spoke about electrification and the importance of electrification. And I have to agree with all the previous speakers that this is also important for this proposed development. Yeah, and additionally, I think the buildings along that are being proposed to be built along Duvarin, they're not nearly tall enough, and also need to consider electrification in terms of reaching our goals of sustainability and getting the use of fossil fuels down. But yeah, it's hard to balance the need for housing along with the need for sustainability. But I know your hearts are in the right place on these issues, and I would encourage the developer also to take it to heart. We want the best developments. We want to add neighbors to our neighborhoods in Ann Arbor, and let's move forward. I'm really excited to see Planning Commission moving forward on a lot of these properties and developments and these issues. But yes, it's important to consider electrification. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
We have one more attendee who has a raised hand, Alex Lowe. Now you can unmute and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Hi folks, it's Alex Lowe again, 3340 Fernwood Avenue. I want to start with just a quick correction to Dr. Larry Dunk. Gas heating isn't a 20th century technology. We've been piping methane into people's houses and burning fossil flatulence since the 19th century, so it's even older than that. I am pro heat pump and pro electrification. I certainly think that gas stoves are a terrible idea. And quite frankly, heat pumps, especially ground source ones, are a no-brainer. There aren't many things in engineering that are win-win situations, but these are. Better for the environment, even with DTE's coal-fired generation, and it's something that they'll have to eventually do anyway. Putting in geothermal heat pumps now, while there's already going to be large construction equipment all over the site, it's going to be far cheaper than retrofitting the buildings later. We've heard tonight from some real environmentalists with real concerns, as well as from someone using faux environmentalist arguments to oppose this development. I'd like to add one more real environmentalist perspective. I would like to see electric stoves, heat pumps, etc. I'm okay right now with having gas for backup heating for the middle of winter, and maybe for water heaters. If we could get a limited one, that would be great. But another environmental thing that seems to have been overlooked is the sheer magnitude of space that we're devoting to, or specifically of land use that we're devoting to the storage of cars, rather than housing people. I think that a much better version of this project would be R4E zoned, and would have either far less parking or have that parking in structures. I really would encourage the developers to consider this, especially given the just enormous environmental damage that cars do globally every year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have another caller with their hand raised. Give me 1 second. Caller with phone, things jumping. Caller with phone number ending 194. Please unmute and you may speak to the Planning Commission for 3 minutes. Caller ending in
Hello?
19. Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you. Hi, this is Rita Mitchell calling. I live at 621 5th Street in Ann Arbor. And I'll just let you know that I am chair of the Environmental Commission in Ann Arbor, but I am speaking for myself tonight. And I want to thank all the speakers who called out the point of needing to move to electrification as soon as possible. Our need for that is urgent because of the climate emergency. So I only want to call out the point that the real expense right now, I think that the current developer probably won't be the long-term owner of this property, and so is looking at costs related to initial implementation. But we need to look long-term, and so my comment is that what's really expensive is retrofit. We should not set up buildings now that have to be retrofitted in the future in order to accommodate the electrification that we know we need now. That's all. Thank you very much. Thanks for your work. Bye-bye.
Thank you. No other callers, so we will move on to the proposed motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and the city council approve the Village of Ann Arbor R4A zoning and site plan located at 1710 Duvarn and within the southeast quadrant of the Pontiac Trail and Duvarn Road. Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Commissioner Weich. We are in discussion. Would anyone like to kick us off? Oh, Councilmember Dish.
I will take the privilege of speaking first because this is a project that is in my ward. I appreciate the acknowledgement by a number of the speakers that we are all on the same side. None of us denies the seriousness of anthropogenic climate change. None of us lacks a sense of urgency about the problem. In this, as in every situation, we confront trade-offs, and we can emphasize what this project does not do, but we could also emphasize what it does do. This is a forward-looking, future-looking project that repurposes a blighted site that has a capped landfill on it, has sat vacant for over 50 years, I think, right? This is diverse housing. These are not high bedroom count units targeting students. Students are welcome to live there, and they may well. This project adds some housing at an accessible price point to an area that has seen, on the one hand, high-end market construction, and on the other, construction targeting students, designed for students, and not very adaptable to anything other than student use. It is the 164 for-sale condos are all electric. That is not how this project came to us. It required considerable negotiation, hard work by staff, and a lot of, I think, genuine goodwill by the developer, who has spent an enormous amount of time and money trying to figure out how to build residential, houses, which is all houses are residential houses, how to put a residential project on a site with a landfill. All of the buildings and homes within this project, not just the condos, but all of them, will include electric cooking appliances and electric washers and dryers. I wish that there were simple choices, but there are no simple choices. The city does not have the legal ability or really any other tools to compel developers to heat and cool all new buildings with electric power. And until we are able to impose the same requirements on everyone who comes to us with this kind of project, this is not a PUD. This is not the same. Yes, we are rezoning annexed properties, but it's not the same as when we face a PUD. I don't feel that we can randomly hold some people to higher standards than we hold others. We need to treat everyone who wants to build here fairly. No one is seeing this only in terms of dollars. I'm seeing it in terms of 604 more people who will come to the north end of Pontiac Trail rather than driving in on M14, which is doing a whole lot of damage to our community. And so I understand the things that this development doesn't do. I value the things that it does. This is a small piece of a project that has been very, that has required a whole lot to bring it to fruition. I think that we would have negotiated in bad faith if we did not allow this last bit of this project to go through and welcome the green space that these residents will have. It's marvelous to provide such amenities. So, thanks.
Commissioner Salve.
I'll echo that. Yeah, we have a hard time, and we have a lot of work to do relative to incentivizing. I agree that there are tools that we can probably incorporate that we haven't yet to help incentivize, not require. That's what we can do at this table. And I'm looking forward to a lot more of those conversations, and we are in the crisis that this should be near the top of our list. At the same time, there's just this unique point of this project that with the addition of this, we get more open space, so we remove the requirement, and we get more density simultaneously. So it just seems like a little nuance to celebrate within our zoning that's going right, that we get open space and density simultaneously. And a lot of the pieces that, we go back to the trade-offs is, if not here, those homes are going to go somewhere. The housing crisis doesn't stop at our city borders. It goes elsewhere, and the market will follow it. And we have a green belt. And so those homes aren't going nearby in the township. They're leapfrogging over that green belt and commuting even further away. So our ideas of the green belt from 30 years ago are actually having repercussions on increasing our vehicle miles traveled. And the townships and the municipalities in our perimeter are not putting the pressure on electrification. Where we are not only putting the pressure on and seeing developers kind of meet us somewhere, we are continuing to try to work on those incentives as well. I'll add, I appreciate the utility cost. MISHDA's utility schedule for our region actually matches this very similarly. So just to kind of add anecdotal data, heating is $11 more for electric versus natural gas, cooking $7, heating water $15. Service for gas is $14, for electric is $10. So that gives us a delta of $29 additional a month for MISHDA and how they factor in your cost of living at your 30% for your AMA calculations. So similarly, we see between $21 and $31 a month, and MISHDA is here at $29 to $33 a month. So MISHDA's done the work too, and MISHDA's also done the work to calibrate and say affordable and electric are also compatible, right? And they're factoring that in. So it's just good to see, and it's also recognizing that electricity is more, but also supported by our affordable housing factors at the same time. So I don't see it ever as an excuse that a little bit more a month makes it inaccessible or inaffordable. It just kind of validates we're all working with utility costs as the issue. And maybe my final point, and I know we had this discussion the first time around, that DTE and the service on the north side is difficult. And I understand that there were conversations around this project and what service could come. And again, we have a lot of conversations to have as a community with our utility and service providers to put that pressure on to bring more service to these areas, because we want to see more density and we want to see it serviced by electricity. But I don't want to see it serviced by gas outside of our community. And it's serviced by gas and then connected by gas cars simultaneously. So I look forward to supporting this with the tools that we have as it's presented today. But I appreciate all the variables and the conditions presented, and we understand, and we're really working towards that, if I can kind of offer that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Salve. Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I can't really follow either of those, so I will say I concur. And I have a question for the petitioner. You mentioned an easement housing is with the neighbor, and I remember when you were here before, we talked, I think, a lot about the lack of connectivity into that neighborhood at that time. So were you able to make inroads with that community that's to the northwest to allow to have more like penetration and connectivity between the sites?
No, I was referring to the two single-family homes that are on Duvarn. So there's a common access right now off of Duvarn for that.
Mm-hmm.
We're shifting that over, allowing them to access on our new road. So that's what I was referring to. I don't believe there's any opportunity necessarily to connect to Duvarn on the park, just because there are homes basically backing up all the way to actually adjacent to the landfill. So no, that's what I was referring to right there.
Oh, okay, so those homes are not, that is not part of.
Correct. That's to our west
Okay.
of the entrance, yes.
Oh, bummer. So that still doesn't connect.
Yes.
Okay. Then one more question.
Yes.
What is the distance? So I was just trying to, like, I'm looking at the clubhouse, I'm looking at the new park, and I'm looking at the new townhomes that are being proposed off of Duvarn. Like, to walk from, like, that building that's right on Duvarn down to the clubhouse, how long do you think that would take? And is that a path you're envisioning that people, I'm concerned about people being like, I want to use the pool, I'm just going to drive there, you know? So I'm just wondering, how are you thinking about like making that street feel like something that people want to walk down? Or I can't get a sense of like the distance.
It's about a quarter mile, I'd
Okay.
say. So, I mean, it's certainly, I mean, we obviously encourage walking. We did put parking down by the clubhouse, but we limited it.
Mhm.
I know that was part of a conversation we had earlier. So we did that specifically for that. So yeah, the encouragement obviously is to walk to it. I can certainly understand your concern, but our whole intent was to create all these paths so people will use them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're thinking of this, like whatever you can do in terms of like wayfinding signage and stuff like that. 'Cause it just feels like you're way up here on Duvarn is
Yes.
a little disconnected, you know?
It is.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking bird's eye view. I don't know what it's going to look like when it's done, but just anything you can do to encourage like people to be like taking the trails or taking the
Yeah.
sidewalks to get
I
down to the
appreciate
clubhouse.
that thought. It's hard to see. Obviously, we'll have a connection. Actually, there's so many trees there, you can't really see it, but on the east side of that north-south street where the landfill is, there's a sidewalk there, so that's kind of the encouragement there. You mentioned wayfinding. I've never mentioned it, but we have kind of a robust wayfinding plan that I think hopefully everybody will appreciate, just to kind of theme this all. So those, exactly what you're talking about, it'll have directions to some of these pathways.
Awesome. And one of the callers mentioned parking. It does seem like a lot of parking. I also know this area of town, and like it's hard to get around without a car, but it does seem like an awful lot of parking. But we don't have minimums, we don't have maximums, so.
Yeah, and I don't know if you wanted to respond to that or not. We talked about, I know we limited quite a bit. There was, I think Commissioner Weiss had kind of made those comments early, and we did reduce quite a bit of parking on the southern side. The northern side, we're about 1.5 spaces per unit. Our concern with going any lower than that is there's really not another area to park. So we didn't want to, flood the neighbors to the west or the church to the east. So there just wasn't an opportunity to have any overflow parking in our mind there.
Well, I thank you for not putting it up against the road.
No, yes. I mean, we consciously wanted to put the buildings up against the road. We think that that's good planning practice, for sure.
Thanks.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner White.
Thanks for coming back and remembering that I was opposed to all the parking.
That's
I
right.
remain opposed to all the parking, especially when you first presented it, and it was quite significant. I wonder, as we've heard from the public tonight around the concerns with the gas and hookups, and I know Mr. Garber has actually spent a lot of time talking with you and speaking before us about your project in particular, to try to convince you, because we lack the authority to deny this request because you are hooking up to gas. But I wonder sort of where you are today, because this has been a multi-month project, and are you willing to reconsider hooking up gas and going all electric for this new addition?
So it's the same, I guess the same arguments we had before, and I do understand things have changed a bit, and I've heard those comments. We have met quite a bit with Mr. Garber, Mr. Fine, and Mazursky as well. So I mean, we've had those conversations. In fact, we're willing to have more conversations. They've actually invited us to a forum, which we were excited to be part of. We're happy to be part of it. So yes, I think we're open to those conversations. As of right now, no, we're not willing to commit any more than what we've commit. We did, though, commit, and I think Commissioner Dish had mentioned, Councilmember Dish had mentioned the appliances, the washer and dryer. Those are all electric. And then we will, it's not a matter of retrofitting. We will plan on the front end for the replacement of those when they go. And it is 8 to 15 years, I think, is really what the thought process is. That's our game plan now. We're open, though. As I mentioned, we have accepted their offer to meet with the forum. We're not going to just turn our back and go from there. So I know that's easy for me to say, and just believe me, but we're willing to keep the door open, and they'll attest to that. I'm sure they will.
And can you remind us the length of time you've applied for the brownfield abatement? Is it a 30-year abatement?
It's a 15, I believe.
So 15 year?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Thank you for the presentation, and to all the commenters, obviously. We have talked about this at length. Again, the legislative tensions with respect to what zoning act enables us to do is the challenge. I think Commissioner White asked the question that I was going to ask, which is simply, have you tried? I mean, there's a trade-off of, natural gas piping is also very expensive, right? So there's a initial build cost relative to, but again, infrastructure, once it's installed, tough to take away. So with that being said, I think I agree with I concur with the comments made earlier. And I think I am not seeing any additional comments. I believe this goes to a roll call vote. Ms. Leo.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams?
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé?
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Dish?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Mills?
Yes.
Commissioner Weatherby?
Yes.
That's 9 votes. The motion passes.
Thank you. We are moving on to the next order of business. It is 10:20. Let me just check in with commissioners. Okay, we will take 5 and we will reconvene at 10:24. Thank you. All right, we're calling the Planning Commission back into session. Moving on to Section 9D of the agenda, regular business. I'm going to introduce a petition 3701 and 3713 Riverside Drive, annexation and zoning for city council approval. Request to annex these two parcels totaling 0.74 acres in Ann Arbor Township to the city of Ann Arbor and zone it to R1B, single-family dwelling. The staff recommendation is approval. We'll begin with staff presentation. Mr. Kowalski.
Thank you. That was pretty much my presentation right there. But, I mean, there's not much to this. As Chairman Lee just read, it's two single-family parcels, basically a building on one of them, a house. The other one is vacant. Again, they had originally requested R1A zoning. Staff had come up with an R1B zoning, the difference being 10,000 square feet per lot, 20,000 square feet minimum lot R1A, and 10,000 square feet minimum for R1B. And that pretty much summarizes the presentation. Yep, and of course, staff's recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for taking your thunder.
Yeah,
but I think the R1B explanation.
Take all the rest of them too.
The R1B was very helpful. I'm going to now move to public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the proposed Riverside Drive annexations. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 or *6 if listening by phone, or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background sounds so that we can hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to speak? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
There is one person with their hand raised. Alex Lowe, you are now able to address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Hi, it's me again, Alex Lowe, 3340 Fernwood Avenue. If anyone on the commission, other than potentially Commissioner Weatherby, doesn't know what I'm going to say at this point, you don't have to out yourself, but maybe pay more attention, because it's going to be the same drum beat that I have for every one of these. It's great that we're doing this annexation. It should be R1E or maybe even R2A. There's nothing that is allowed in R1B that is disallowed in either of those districts, and that allows more freedom for the property owner as further development happens. Especially noting that one of the lots is entirely vacant, and so if the current owner were to sell that under R1B, what could be done with it would be far more restricted than either under an R1E or R2A zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Any other callers?
There are no other callers with their hands raised.
Thank you. With that, I will close public comment, and I will read the proposed motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission recommends the mayor and the city council approve the annexation and R1B single-family dwelling district zoning of 3701 and 3713 Riverside Drive. Moved by Commissioner Mills, Councilmember Dish. Discussion. Don't all speak at once. Councilmember Dish.
I will merely ask the question, seeing as I have heard some feedback from residents in the area where we rezoned to R1D. Is there any reason why we shouldn't do the same here, since we did it elsewhere? I think from the report, the wording of the report, I think I know what you will say, and I'm not saying I want to change this because you know, we did it to Ward 1, let's do it to Ward 2 too.
I would only mention within the R1 category, staff feels it is the Planning Commission's discretion prerogative. We would caution against an amendment to a multifamily district on the floor because of the public water and sanitary sewer impacts have not been studied.
Commissioner Weich.
But we could go to R1D, because all that is that just changes the minimum lot size. It doesn't restrict them from just putting 2 single-family homes on the lots as they are currently sized. It would just increase the density later. If they choose to sell, they could subdivide it into 4. And what I don't understand, since it fronts here on River Drive, are there any restrictions that I'm not aware of in terms of the orientation of that subdivision that would prevent them from being able to fully realize the 4, from being able to go, if it's a 10,000, you were considering R1A, so it's a 20,000 square foot lot. So going from R1A to D would allow for 4. And so are there restrictions in the code that would prevent that subdivision and not be allowed in that space?
No. There's nothing in the code that would preclude, I mean, there may be natural, I was trying to pull up a map really quickly. There could be other elements, but there's nothing necessarily in the code that would preclude them from getting access to that if they have frontage along a public road.
So I would be happy to amend from R1B to R1D, since it has no significant impact on how they're planning to use it, and I don't think we have to renotice.
No.
Commissioner or Councilmember Dish?
Either way, I'm proud of both. I noticed in the report, it's a 0.74 acre site. So, so if it were R1A, there would be, they say, one house only. That would be an extremely inefficient use of the space, which is 32,000 square feet. If it were R1B, it goes up to 3, and if it were R1D, the max would be 6. And I don't know if they looked at natural features when they calculated that. They were just doing the math.
I could say, those are just based on the raw numbers. So again, once you put layouts and setbacks in there, I don't know, I rarely see that actually penciling out exactly like 6 lots.
Right. And I think we should, I'm rehearsing all of these arguments with people whom I need to talk to about this not being such a dramatic thing to do, because, so in this case, unlike the other case that we had, the owner intends to sell the parcels for development opportunities. So we know here that that is the plan. So, the more you subdivide, the less you charge for the house. So at some point, your own financial calculation might say to you, I think 3 is fine, even if it is zoned for 6. So, I don't know why we don't, on the logic that we had for the last one, zoning changes nothing. We add more flexibility. I take the report seriously. It says R1B is recommended for consistency with surrounding land uses and the opportunity to evaluate future zoning of the area comprehensively. We aren't leaping from residential to multifamily residential, or single family to multifamily. So I would feel good about it, but I don't really feel strongly about it, and I also am tired, as everyone knows. So whatever.
No. Commissioner Weich.
Yeah, we didn't have a strong argument the last time either. And only to understand it, it wasn't at the table. It wasn't a big back and forth, because I think the thing that I learned from Commissioner Sauvé was when Mr. Leonard responded around density, because I went looking at those 11 parcels that were coming in on not Nixon.
It's also off here on River, some of it.
Sure.
Newport.
Yeah, Newport. I was like, let's go to R4C. That's where I started. And I was just not being ambitious enough. You know, I should have gone all the way to whatever our highest residential density is, which I've talked to with Ms. DeLeo about, like, let's just go all the way to R6. But in any event, I think it's easy for me to support the conversation that you've started for us to go from R1B to R1D. And I think just as a signal to planning staff, if there's a way for us to sort of say, can you all bring things that are township islands in at the highest residential density that makes sense for that? As we gear up, I think that just makes the conversation a little bit better because it sort of pits the staff against the council or against the table, and I don't think there's that much distance. Because even Mr. Khan said when we sat here, he's like, I'm not going to defend R1A, but that didn't get into any public comments. It was all, you know, we just decided to change it at the table, and he was the person. He was like, I'm only picking it because that's what the code says. And I just don't think that's a strong enough argument for us as we're sort of trying to improve what we're doing with density. So I fully support where you're going, Commissioner Dish.
Commissioner Salve.
I'll just add some quick math that if we're looking at frontage with R1D, it would be 5 instead of 6 parcels could be the lot split. So that is actually more of the limiting factor than the 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. It's the lot frontage. Just for more spatial context for it. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Salve. Do I have a friendly to amend to R1D? Well, first, will you move?
Yeah, I moved
Oh,
it.
yeah, to R1D, seconded by Commissioner Salve. Discussion? All in favor?
Oh, wait, sir.
Sorry.
Of the amendments.
Yes.
Yeah. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so now we're in discussion for R1D. Okay, and Commissioner Mills.
The only reason that I had a slight pause in terms of differences is in part how it's currently served by public transit, which is when we were thinking about this before, I mean, it's right on a bus line. This is less removed, but I also think that we need to plan for what we want to see in the future. And the idea that there would be, I don't know that there's any bus service on here on River Drive right now, but the idea that we would want more frequent bus service on here on River Drive, sure. So I would just put that into the mix as we're kind of debating. I mean, collapsing overall the number of districts that we have makes a whole lot of sense anyway. But yeah, I think we need to start the trend somewhere about like what is the appropriate R1 zone. So yeah.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Dish.
The only, I'm not a lawyer. We know this one, we have a statement of intent to sell the parcels for development opportunities. And I know that, I don't know if that creates a presumption that we are engaging in a form of zoning that we should not do in order to create wealth for a developer. The fact that we know that as an intent, that is the biggest difference between this and the other one, so.
I would
Thank
say
you.
absolutely not. I
Okay.
mean, there's no, that intent could go through, yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Commissioner Salve.
Our intent is to create housing. And that's what this does.
I believe, any other discussion? I believe we're good for a roll call vote.
My job. Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé?
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Dish?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Mills?
Yes.
And Commissioner Weatherby.
Yes.
That is 9 in favor. The motion passes.
Thank you. Yes. Now we move on to Section 10A, Other Business. Notice of intent to plan will go to staff presentation and Mr. Kowalski.
Yep. Well, we don't really have a presentation tonight.
Yeah.
You didn't read my whole intro
Yeah.
here.
All
but
you, man.
This is the requirement that I think many of you have seen before, basically in the Planning Enabling Act, that requires us to distribute, or actually, at this point, it's the notice to plan. Basically, that we send out to all the adjacent communities and telling them that we're starting up a plan. So really with that, I mean, we have kind of a motion in there and a little bit of background there, so we can answer questions, but otherwise, it's just really looking for Planning Commission to approve the motion so we can release the documents to the, or at least let the adjoining people know that we're planning.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Kowalski. I'll read the proposed motion. Resolved by the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission that a notice of intent to plan be shared with the surrounding communities and applicable agencies as prescribed by the Michigan Planning Enable Act. Moved by Commissioner White and seconded by Commissioner Mills. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on to Section 10B, Other Business, Bylaws Discussion. The agenda, okay. Do you want to give a quick introduction here, or should I just read it?
Well, you're going to read it, but yeah, no, we're recommending it be postponed at this time. And at the next meeting, the city attorney, and as well as planning manager, will be present to go through the rest of the explanations.
Gotcha. All right, sounds good. I move that the consideration of the proposed bylaws modification be postponed to the October 3rd, 2023 Planning Commission. Moved by Commissioner Salve, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Moving on to Section 11, public comment. This is an opportunity for people to speak up to 3 minutes about any issue that's not listed on the public hearing on this agenda. We'll first call on individuals present to address the commission, then remote participants. To speak during this public hearing remotely, please press *9 if listening by phone or use the raise hand feature if viewing through the web link. For phone access, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your phone number or by name if available for those accessing through the web link. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area so that we may hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and your address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present that would like to address the commission? Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to address the commission remotely?
There are no callers. Oh, no. There is a caller.
Thank you.
Alex Lowe, you may now unmute and address the Planning Commission for 3 minutes.
Hi guys, I'm back. I'm really disappointed that we only got R1D. I'd like to point out that from the documents it says that R1D can get a maximum of 6 homes on the space, and R2A could get 6 duplexes or 12 homes. And it seems like the only opposition to that was, well, we haven't studied the utility.
Mr. Lowe, we can't hear you. Mr. Lowe?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that. It's Alex Lowe yet again, 3340 Fernwood Avenue. I'm a little bit disappointed in that last piece, specifically about it only getting to R1D, which allows 6 units in that area of land. R2A would have allowed 6 duplexes. It seems the discussion was pushed aside purely because of not having studied the utility difference of those potential extra 6 units, but this is a potential of 6 extra units. It's not like we're adding 30,000 housing units to Ann Arbor with that. We're adding the potential of 6 more homes. That doesn't seem like a huge burden to me. We should be studying that by default, maybe even all the way up to R4E by default, so that we know rather than having to guess. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. Any other callers?
There are none.
Seeing no other callers, we'll round out public comment. We're moving on to section 12, commission proposed business. Is there any commission proposed business? Chocolate is something I heard. Thank you to Ms. DeLeo. Chocolate. We'll move on to seeing no other commission proposed business. Adjournment moved by Commissioner Weich, seconded by Councilmember Dish. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.
Not everybody